I'm going to call this meeting to order. So happy to have all you people here. It's great. Very exciting. Lots to talk about. So this is the school committee meeting of January 9th, 2018. We are going to have a brief opportunity for public comment, student report from Megan Jens. Then we have some reports and discussion items, a mid-year financial report from Ellen Whittemore, look at the 2018-19 school calendar, a report on proposed world language expansion, a report on proposed course changes at the middle school and high school, an update on the McCall Middle School expansion project. Then we're going to take a look at the proposed policy on traffic studies that the Board of Selectmen is looking at. Then we have a vote to approve an overnight trip for the high school chorus, and we'll be hearing from Joel Buford. We have some gifts that we would need to vote to accept. Then we have a vote to approve the superintendent's contract, a vote to access the Mystic School property in preparation for a lease. Then we have some policies, school committee policies to look at and possibly revise. We have some minutes to approve, a chair report, a superintendent report, and just to be clear, the future agenda items coming up we're going to be talking about the fiscal year 19 proposed budget and having a public hearing on that on January 23rd. We're going to have a report on the school start time study on January 30th, and then also at that meeting we'll be discussing and voting on the fiscal year 19 budget. And then we have, we're looking forward to some reports on the visual and music arts programs. We also have the next meeting that's coming up is a joint meeting with the select board, and that's to talk about a proposal from Swim Winchester to raise money and build a pool on Skilling's Field. So, is anyone here for public comment? Yes. So you remember the rules, you're supposed to give us your name and street and try to keep things brief. But thank
Hello.
you. Hi.
I'm Zena Marchant. I'm here to tell you a little bit about what's been happening with the Winchester Parent Advisory Council.
Good. Could you just maybe slide the mic over?
On December 13th, we had a very well-attended event for neuropsych evaluations and interpreting the results. We had, I think, around 50 people attending, so we were very excited to see that. Coming up, we would like to let everyone know that we have an anti-bullying workshop on January 17th from 7 to 8:30 at the library's large meeting room, and we'll have let's see, it's called Massachusetts Anti-Bullying Law, IEP, and School-Wide Strategies to Prevent Bullying of Students with Disabilities. It'll be presented by Leslie Hughes from the Massachusetts Advocates for Children. So we hope that will have a big audience again. So we just want to let you know.
Great. Thank you very much. So Megan, can we hear our students report now, please?
So the WHS sports teams are off to a very strong start, with the girls and boys hockey teams both winning their games this past weekend. And the gymnastics team also got their first win yesterday too. The guidance department will be hosting a PSAT student parent workshop tomorrow from 7 to 8 p.m. in the WHS auditorium. Midterms are next week, and there will be an hour break in between the two exams for each day to allow for students who have extra time for tests. The voter registration drive will be held by the League of Women Voters of Winchester in the cafeteria on January 25th, and any students who are 16 or older are able to register, which is really exciting. The school adjustment counselors as well as the guidance department are working together to put on a program called Minding Your Mind. And the objective is to provide mental health education to teens, parents, teachers, and administrators. The program will be held all day on during the school hours on January 23rd for students who have a free block and they can sign up and go and attend the program. And then there will be a community event on the evening of the January 23rd, and then a follow-up session will be held on the 24th during school. Just a couple of Winchester High School students have been recently recognized. Catherine Yu, who is a sophomore, just won the bronze in the Girls' National Math Olympiad. And Lena Zidane and Marcus Albanese, their artwork was selected for the Emerging Young Artist 2018 exhibition, which is really exciting. The WHS Gives Back, which was held last December, was a huge success. They raised over $18,000, so they exceeded their goal, and we were able to buy gifts for 127 kids in Winchester. And next semester, WHS will be implementing WinBlock, which is a designated block that will meet every Wednesday for kids basically to have a productive kind of break where they can work on homework or get help from teachers. They can also participate in yoga classes, or there will be some lectures. And the classes on each Wednesday, those classes will be shortened from 67 minutes to 52 minutes to allow time for this block. And that's it.
Excellent, that's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Anybody have any quick questions for Megan? Anyone?
Good luck on exams.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you.
So I'd like to kind of take some things out of order to allow some of our guests to come on up and go home, who've been teaching all day. So Joel, if you're ready, can we go ahead and talk about the overnight trip?
Absolutely. Start going? Oh,
Hit
sorry.
it.
Those guys are going to come at me with questions.
Oh.
So on the agenda it says it's for chorus, but it's for band, orchestra, and choir.
Okay.
So,
That was one of the questions.
yeah, it's a good question. So we plan on
64.
taking anyone that's this is a non-required trip, so we're opening it up as a cultural enrichment activity
Okay.
for the students, and we're just trying to gain interest right now. So we've proposed it, and their interest is coming in as we speak. So right now we're just making sure that we have ensembles to take, and we'll see where we go. Yeah, and we look for going down to Nashville. So what's particularly interesting about this experience is called the AIM experience, and AIM stands for Affirm, Inspire, Mentor. So when we go down there, we're preparing our groups for a festival environment where we'll be performing with other groups separately. We're adjudicated by university college professors. They come up with us on stage. They do a clinic with us on stage in front of the other groups. Then we go to a clinic after that. Part of this trip, we'll be doing a recording session in Nashville, famous Studio B. There's wonderful parts of it, of all the trip, of the whole experience, is to give this cultural enrichment experience to the students. So that's where we're going with it. And yeah, questions?
So do you have a sense of how many students you're going to be taking? And
We set on the, again, we're working with World Strides, who we are working with, the town has worked with on several occasions,
Right.
especially the Washington, D.C. trip. Last year I used World Strides when we did the Carnegie Hall trip as well. We anticipated between 100 and 150 students, so we hope to get between that number, but unsure at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. No,
Yeah,
it's-
good question.
And so you're looking for us to give you a green light so you can continue to
You got it.
build this and sign up your chaperones and
You got it.
all that.
Absolutely.
And are the students going to be fundraising for?
You've got it. So as far as fundraising, World Strides has two programs that they offer. One of them I find interesting, and it's not new to Winchester, is We Fund Them donation engine. So it's you set up an app on your phone or set up a donation page, and we advertise it. The students advertise it saying, hey, we're trying to raise money for this particular cause. Can you make a donation? And parents, families, friends, coworkers go right to the website and they make a donation. The kids are interested in doing a dump run, which I thought was interesting because in the fall, it's very popular, but now nobody's doing it for obvious reasons.
For obvious
But
reasons.
I was like, this is a golden opportunity for us. So, so we're trying
competition.
exactly. So we're trying to arrange that, and and for me personally, and for speaking on Mary and Nick Castilla's behalf, it's fun to add the musical element to the dump run somehow. I don't know if they're going to play or sing while we're selling the dump run tickets, but that'd make it extra special. I just remember when we did a car wash for Jubilation Singers years back. A lot of people said when they came through the car wash, it was the first time in their whole life where you had 20 pairs of hands washing a car, but they were singing at the same time while you're in your vehicle. So it was a very interesting experience. So the dump run, maybe we'll just being a part of your day that was joyful because people were playing instruments or singing to you while you're dropping off your trash.
So a question and maybe just a comment. My understanding is when the Disney trip happens every 3 or 4 years, that the band actually rents some instruments down there, just given the logistics of getting on a plane. So are the costs for renting instruments sort of buried in this trip, or is that borne by the music budget? Do you know?
That's a
sort of
great
the
question.
I'm
That's a
throwing.
great question. So while we're down there, we'll also have an opportunity to either work with Vanderbilt University or Belmont, where the clinic will happen. They have instruments for us to borrow while we're down there. Especially the larger instruments, because it's impossible for us to travel with those on an airplane. As far as the instruments, the smaller instruments, the kids will be just bring their own, which is fine.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and then more of a comment than a question. So for some of our upperclassmen who are varsity athletes, there are all sorts of things that happen in their lives in the spring, and even for juniors, we think about college trips, visiting universities, and sometimes there's some conflict in terms of coaches' expectations. So in this instance, because it's a school-sponsored trip, I'm hoping that there would be some understanding with coaches for our spring athletes who may also be participating in the music program, so that they may be able to participate in the trip and have some flexibility for those, because we're talking about 2 school days, right? I think a Thursday, Friday.
Correct.
So there may be the necessity to miss something with your sport.
And I would guess talk to the coach, and communication about it would be key,
Yep.
ahead of time. And, good, okay.
It bumps right up against April vacation,
Because
too.
it bumps right up against it,
So
correct.
there may be some confusion, too, with people wanting to stay down there to look at schools or
Right.
on the other end.
Sure. Sure.
So for whatever that's worth. But
Sure.
it's an exciting trip. It's sort of a hybrid trip because it's World Strides, but it's during the school year.
Yes.
So it's an unusual trip for us.
Yes,
But
it really is. We do have an opportunity to not perform at the Grand Ole Opry stage. That's nearly impossible.
Correct.
But they want to put us in the pavilion outside it, which would still be fun.
Mm-hmm.
But if anything else, to go definitely see one of the vaudeville shows or some kind of show actually at the Opry, which would be nice for one of the evenings.
After they hear you, they'll bring you in.
That would be that would be fantastic.
You sang at Carnegie Hall. You have the cred.
Hey, I will use all those
They've got the
to our
resume.
benefit.
I had a chance last spring to talk to some of the students about what their most remarkable and memorable moments were at the high school, and these kinds of trips were high on the list. So
I'm glad to
thank
hear
you
you
for
say
making
that.
it happen.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And thank you for your support. We appreciate it.
So you want a motion?
So a motion would be good, yes.
So I move. Sorry.
64?
64. Yeah.
You're there.
I move that we vote to approve the trip for the band orchestra choir. Is that right?
Yes.
Band orchestra choir to Nashville, Tennessee on April 12th through 15th, as presented, provided all the necessary paperwork is in order, and with the superintendent having authority to cancel the trip in case of adverse world circumstances.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Joel.
everyone.
very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Happy New Year.
Yep. You as well. Have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thanks.
So should we go straight to the world language
Yes.
expansion report?
Yes.
Anna, if you're ready.
So, Anna, do you want to just sit up, and George, do you want to just sit up here in case there are questions? And I can kind of lead off and give the summary of where we are with this. So, as you know, the district does curriculum review periodically, and this happens to be one of the content areas that I'm leading the curriculum review, and I'm finding it incredibly enjoyable. We have a great group of facilitation team members: Grace Tripp, Karen Fagan, Stephanie Yonker, Anna Taroni, Mary Elizabeth DeCamp, Valentina Cella, and George Goncalves, and myself, leading the charge, but lots of other middle and high school language teachers involved as well. We're on page 22 if you want to follow along. The purpose of curriculum review is to take a look at our instruction, our curriculum, our alignment with the standards, our strengths, our challenges, and then host a visiting team of experts. This is particularly helpful in the area of world language because it's such a specialty area that bringing in superstar teachers and directors and maybe some second college level folks to take a look at our program is a great place for us to validate our self-study and also make some recommendations after visiting classes and interviewing teachers and parents and students. So we're probably about 2/3 of the way through the study. Concurrent with the facilitation work is curriculum updating. So there were other groups of teachers who this summer and will continue into the year looking at the curriculum for world language. And so the reason we're bringing you some kind of preliminary recommendations is because it could have budget implications, and we don't want to wait until the visit has been concluded and lose a whole year in terms of making recommendations. So the committee conducted also, the facilitation committee conducted some surveys, and I've provided the survey summaries for you so that you can review them to gauge how well we're meeting the community's desires in the area of world language, what their experiences have been, and it was pretty eye-opening to see the wide variety of folks who are very enthusiastic about continuing and expanding our world language program. So as we expected, there is very strong support for beginning language study earlier. All of the research says that the earlier the better in terms of gaining fluency in a second language. As you know, our students currently begin language study in grade 7, although our middle school starts in grade 6. There are many high-performing districts who have elementary programs where all of the elementary students have second language study from kindergarten up. There are some who have immersion classrooms at the elementary level. And so I have long been vocal in my belief that we should move the language study down to at least 6th grade to enable our students the same opportunity that other high-performing districts have to develop proficiency as early as possible, and then perhaps even pick up a second language when they get to high school. And so the recommendation is that we start the study of world language in grade 6 rather than grade 7. Also, there was strong support for exploring, not next year but the year after, the establishment of an immersion program, which is a complicated program to run, where students are taught primary instruction in the second language. And districts do it in a variety of languages: Spanish, French, Mandarin. And so there are obviously some costs and some logistics toward organizing that and looking at who would be eligible to participate. But that's something that we'd like to get your feedback on for further exploration. We'd also like to expand beyond our current course offerings, which include French, Italian, Spanish, and Latin at the high school, and add a modern spoken non-Western language that will expand our cultural exploration and provide an additional option for students. Some years ago, we added Mandarin as a choice at the high school level, which in my experience is not a great place to introduce a new language. Getting students to try a new language when they first are learning a new language in middle school is the best time to start language study. Those students tend to stay with the same language, and so starting it at the high school level is often problematic. It's kind of dwindled, and we have had only an online option for several years, and Anna can speak to where we are with that. So we'd like to add Mandarin as our new language at the middle school. There was strong support in the survey for Mandarin. We also suggested possibly Arabic. There were some other suggestions as well. Some people suggested German. But considering that Mandarin is one of the most spoken languages in the world, it seems to be a logical choice. There's also grant opportunity to support the implementation of a Mandarin program. The Confucius Institute, the Hanban folks provide some grants and some teachers. You can partner with local colleges. So there are some financial resources to begin the study of Mandarin. There are also more Mandarin teachers than Arabic teachers or Japanese teachers, I think, available. And so that's the recommendation at this point. I was also incredibly impressed by the recommendation of the world language teachers to move from our traditional Spanish 1, Spanish 2, Spanish 3, Spanish 4 towards a proficiency-based approach to organizing instruction that really focuses on oral and written proficiency in terms of communication as well as culture. and that would allow more flexibility in grouping students. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, that's very text-based, very grammar-based, this would be a model that would change the way teachers teach and group students, and you would go from a novice to an intermediate to an advanced language grouping with some options in between perhaps, which would enable students to move more rapidly through the language progression. Some students have a facility with language and could progress more rapidly. Some might need more time. It also allows an entry point for students particularly at the middle school, if we were to use a proficiency-based program as well. And so that's an approach we're working towards, and I'm going to ask Anna to come and bring some people and present at some point about that. We're still kind of transitioning towards it, and some teachers have done some good professional development. And there was strong support in the department for this kind of orientation. So I want to applaud them because that's a very progressive way to teach language studies. And I think Anna and her team have done a great job taking a hard look at what our strengths and challenges are of the current program. So with that, that's the good news, is that we have strong support for adding another language and moving it down to 6th grade. Any new initiative comes with a cost, and the cost for this program would be 2.4 FTE new grade 6 teachers at an estimated cost of about $132,000. And then some funding for curriculum development, reallocation or supplemental texts, maybe $18,000 or something in the first year. There would be some continuing costs. As you add a new 6th grade program, then you need to adjust your 7th grade program the next year and your 8th grade and so forth. And as we transition to a proficiency-based model, some additional materials might be required, or some curriculum review stipends would need to be allocated. So the reason I bring this up now is because we are going to be presenting our budget, and I would like your response before you see what kinds of resources we have to incorporate this into our budget planning. This is something I feel really strongly is a major deficiency in our current academic program. There are many school districts that have 5 through 8 middle schools, and students start language study in 5th. We have many, many students who develop this proficiency through, as demonstrated by the seal of biliteracy and the excellent performance on AP or college study of language. But I think our students are at a disadvantage compared to other kids who might have two more full years of language study when they're coming up against all the national exams that some of our students take, or the AP tests that our students take. And I just think it's easier to learn a new language when you're younger. So that's the summary of where we are, and I wanted to present it to you and see what questions you had. George and Anna are here to answer questions. I know that Mr. Nixon had submitted some questions, and the answers are at your place. So if you just wanted to scan those. There were questions about, and George, you can answer some of these as well, space availability for this. This would obviously be shared space. We have some new classrooms being added in phase 1 and phase 2. We hope, fingers crossed, that the project is able to be funded. And also, what happens to study skills in 6th grade? So I don't know if we were to move forward with this, would you like to talk
Sure,
about that a little bit?
absolutely. So Anna and I met one day a few weeks ago, and we said, let's map out what the schedules would be, let's map out room locations. So in short order, we were able to create schedules for all the world languages, potentially being offered next year. And the way the schedule would work in grade 6 is, right now in 6th grade, our teachers teach 4 sections of their content area, and then the 5th section that all students attend on team among those 4 teachers is what we call study skills. And study skills is taught differently by different teams, but essentially it provides an opportunity for the teachers to see the kids again once or twice during a given week. And it can be anything related to team events or an additional content area class. And that's how it's being used predominantly, as an additional content area class. In 7th and 8th grade, our teams of teachers teach 5 different sections of their content area. They don't have a study skills block. And a team of teachers is comprised of 4 people. So where's the 5th class? The 5th class is a world language class. So that would be the same model we would use in 6th grade. What we're presently doing in 7th and 8th is what we would do in 6th, which basically means students would see their teachers, math, science, English, and social studies once, and they would see a world language teacher, whatever language they're enrolled in. They would see one of those teachers for that 5th class. And then they would still have 2 periods of exploratory classes.
So no more study skills?
No more study skills.
Not as a separate class. So I think one of the things we discussed at the world language meeting, because the middle school teachers are very invested in the whole child and making sure that whatever they do supports student learning. The middle school language teachers expressed an interest in incorporating the elements of study skills into that class, as well as the core academic teachers do. And so you can teach study skills in a variety of ways when you have 6th graders transitioning to the middle school, and the world language teachers want to participate in that. It would prefer to actually be considered one of the core classes, and work closely with the teams.
And they are one of the core classes now. The other thing about, did you ask about space?
Yes.
Okay, so adding the 3 additional classes where the youth center is now, I am going to be working with the grade 6 teams to identify what team 3 of those 4 teachers will be housed in that new area, brand spanking new area. Who wouldn't want to be there? That's going to free up some classrooms in the building. One, it allows us to make sure our library is 100% library again, and that would still allow us 2 additional classrooms. Based on the schedule that Anna and I worked with, we can have all world language teachers teaching in the same room, same class throughout the day, so we don't have to buy carts for teachers to peddle their wares. We avoid at all costs having teachers travel from the 3rd floor to whatever floor to teach. We avoid it at all costs, and this has allowed us to do that.
Although, just to clarify, as I understand Ms. Taroni's response, so while they may not having, maybe they don't have to go from room to room, there still may be some world language rooms that are still shared.
Oh, for sure.
So depending upon the section or the language or what have you.
Because
So-
in this model, you would have part-time. We presently have 2 part-time world language teachers. You could potentially have more than that, and you'd have teachers potentially teaching 2 classes. So someone teaches 2 periods, they teach beginning of the day, another person teaches middle, another person teaches end. We'll have to decide what walls are Mandarin, French, and
Right.
or what have you, so the kids don't get confused, but we can work that out. Good luck cheating for the test.
Susan, can I follow up with a schedule question?
Sure.
Since you told me you 2 sat down and worked out a schedule, now I'm dying to ask, because there would be expectations around taking world language in 6th grade. Do you foresee any impact on the number of study halls that our kids have? Which, to me, when we have kids who have so many study halls, I feel like there's a lost opportunity to really be immersed in a curriculum of any kind. Is it just too early to know how that might impact it to
We
on the
want
good
as
or bad
many
side?
students in world language as possible, and I'm going to be working, I've already started working with Dr. Elanema,
Yep.
with Anna Taroni, Pam Gerard, our reading people, to really look at, so now it isn't so much who is recommended for world language, it's who's recommended for something that they need in lieu of world language. So the other way around, it just feels like you're either recommended for world language or you're not recommended for anything. And the way we see it is, if you have a literacy-based disability and maybe 6th grade is maybe not yet the time to take world language, we want to provide that as well. We want to provide opportunities for all our kids to get what they want. And the following year, we're also aware that we'll need an entry-level year in 7th grade. Because we could have students moving in from another district, never taking a language, and we're going to tell them, well, you have to go into level 2 or nothing? No. And what if a student wants to make a change in 7th grade? We want to provide that as well.
So that was actually my last question. So, right now, our students are surveyed in the spring of 6th grade year. What language do you want to take? And for most students, you get what you get, you don't get upset. And then if you want to make a change, you do it when you go to the high school. So in this model, how might that work? If you have a student, happy or not, let's say a student takes a language 6th and 7th grade, wants to change and do something new in 8th grade. Is that a possibility, or are we just not there yet to know how it works with that change from the level 1, 2, 3, 4?
We haven't talked about it yet, but because world languages are offered at all different times of the day,
Yep.
there is some great possibility there. We have not had our world languages mixed grades, but
Under a proficiency-based
when
model,
you go into proficiency-based,
I think it's easier to mix students and give them some flexibility.
Sure.
And I would encourage us to think about language as the same as math or social studies, that all students, unless there's a pretty significant disability, should be taking a second language, and we can modify or accommodate as needed. And I think a smaller percentage of our students now take world language than I would expect to. And so I would expect under this scenario with a proficiency-based model that we would have encouraged more students to take the study. Because it's not just about learning how to communicate in language, it's also a cultural piece as well. And the appreciation of a variety of cultures in the world and opening up the world to our students. And so so that's the goal. I think it's going to take us a couple of years to get there. And particularly if we're not able to accommodate this in our budget, which would be heartbreaking to me. But this is something I'm not going to give up on, that we'll eventually get this worked out. But it is a challenging budget year, and so we will have to make hard choices. But there was very strong support from the surveys for us to start language study earlier. The department's very much in favor of it, and enthusiastically willing to go in and dive in and change the way they approach their instruction. And so I think that's really heroic of them, and very, very thoughtful and reflective on their part, too.
and we've had staff express excitement at the possibility of teaching 6th graders. So it just speaks to their love of the language and wanting to be that first world language teacher those kids have and introducing them to the language. So
Sure.
I found that very exciting to hear.
Right. One of the questions from the current teachers was, who gets to teach the 6th graders? Are we going to hire all new teachers for the 6th graders, or do we get to teach the 6th graders? So I thought that was funny.
So, under the proficiency-based model, I heard you, I also was wondering if it would go to a multi-graded instruction, and I also, it made me wonder whether you were looking at going non-graded then with languages as well, if you're talking about proficiency instead of A, B, C, D. Does world language move to something that is?
We haven't talked about
I
that.
think that would be down the road. I think it's too early to do that. It would be a huge cultural change.
Right.
To just drop that.
Right.
So the training that Anna shared with me around the professional development that teachers have, there's a lot of rubrics that will help us assess students' facility with the language in terms of, that it's all the same thing, whether it's learning English or learning another language. It's reading, writing, speaking, listening, communicating, culture. And so we did have some conversations about grading and curriculum and modifying and adjusting curriculum to meet a wider range of learners within one classroom.
Right.
So I think those are some issues we'll wrestle with, which is why we're not diving right in and going to a proficiency-based model right away, but we're going to transition to it.
And would we do proficiency testing then before the students started 6th grade?
Like
Assessment.
That
An
was the
assessment
question I
too.
had.
Before they started?
Before they started 6th grade, because a lot of our students have experience with a second language before, outside of our public schools. They might have proficiency in a certain language that they choose to take. Would we be assessing them before they begin?
So I think once we go to a multi-grade scenario, that there is a possibility that we could have middle school sort of novice, intermediate, advanced.
Right.
And then 6th graders who already have some language study could go into a more advanced,
Yeah.
if our schedule permitted and we could organize that way. But I think the first year, it's going to be a pretty traditional
Right.
For sure.
expectation that when the language you pick up is a new language to you as it is to all the other students.
Right.
One of the things that we did do this year, we talked about, is when the students put their choices down, to ask them to rate themselves of
Right.
what do you think you are?
Right.
Oh.
How proficient do you think you are in
Yeah.
the subject you're picking?
I mean, that does happen, okay, you know, with students who are
Right.
proficient in French or,
Yeah, and that would happen with the teacher in getting to know the kids with a needs assessment and identifying where they are, where their strengths lie, and really understanding what proficiency means. Because speaking in another language once in a while isn't the same as, you know, being able to read and write in that language. There's 4 skills.
Anna, can you talk about the training that some teachers have had on this?
Yes, the Massachusetts Foreign Language Association is really heading the state in foreign languages. The Department of Education in Massachusetts has not upgraded their frameworks since 1999. And because of that, the Massachusetts Foreign Language Association has taken the place of the DESE and taken the lead so that we can compete nationally and keep our standards high. So for the past 2 summers, they've offered what they call the proficiency summer. And it's a week at Westfield State College. It's kind of like summer camp for foreign language teachers. It's the
Sounds a
best.
little crazy.
It's really the best. I'm going to introduce bocce next summer.
Oh, slow down.
Watch out.
So,
George is going just for that.
Home with the
so
owls.
it's like 4 days with teachers from all over the state and also coming from other places in New England too, to learn about proficiency, learn about how to adapt your lessons, how to adapt your teaching and your assessments, understanding the funnel of the, I think you all have a copy of
Yeah,
it,
we
the
just-
proficiency funnel,
Pass it around.
so that we understand what it means for our students to get there. And it's not all about, you know, conjugating a verb. It's not about, I mean, you've all traveled. Have you been on a plane and somebody says, can you conjugate the verb to be for me? No, they don't do that. And we want our kids to know that. We want our kids to know, use the verb to be so that you're understood and you can make expressions and you can talk to people, get your ideas across. And it's a whole shift. It's a whole shift in what we expect and what we want our kids to do. And it's based on also what we call can-do statements, where kids know right up front, today we're going to do this and you're going to be able to do this at the end of the class. And so that's what we do at the proficiency camp. And so the first summer that we offered it, it was at the novice level. For all teachers, went at the novice level. And it didn't mean they were novice speakers of the language. They were novice in the proficiency and understanding proficiency. Then we offered novice and the higher level. Next summer, we're offering a 3rd year of it. And I'm happy that somebody from Winchester went and they really believed what I was talking about for 2 years. And once you get a couple of people, everybody's on the proficiency train now,
good. Okay.
and we're moving.
Anybody else?
Chris has a question.
Couple quick ones. First, thanks for bringing this forward early. It's super helpful. I might recommend that we put together a sort of a multi-year kind of view of what the budget impact would be, and sort of maybe you do like 2 tracks. One would be, you know, both feed in, and the other one would be maybe we take a more sort of a pilot and sort of track and see approach, and whatever that cost would be in tracking that, that'd be super helpful. The second observation I want to say is it's great to see enthusiasm about change, so thank you for bringing that forward. I know change is hard. This sounds like it would be difficult, but the enthusiasm that you're demonstrating for it is great, and that helps us in terms of weighing our chances of success in getting this thing up and running.
I should also say that the teachers are very on board with this. This fall at the MAFLA conference, I think we had 7 teachers attend different proficiency sessions. We came back to Winchester and shared what we learned with each other. We are moving, and don't stop us.
Watch out.
One more quick one. So I just would like to know, what are your thoughts on recruiting successfully recruiting Mandarin teachers. My limited experience with it has been that we're not offering it in many cases because we can't get instructors to do this. Does a promise of a completed program that will extend into the high school create any sort of additional recruiting possibilities? Or is that not even a consideration? How are we going to be successful in getting the right teachers for that language? And then I assume that there is, it's not, I'm a good language teacher, you have to be proficient in that language. So how are we gonna be successful?
I think, one, you have to advertise it early.
Yep.
Two, you do have to show that it's gonna grow.
Commitment
You have
to the
show
future.
Yep.
that teacher that it's going to grow, because nobody is gonna wanna come to teach one course. Who's gonna come to teach one course?
Right. And then
We met them already.
have you thought about how do you get someone who wants to teach high school when you don't offer high school? Can you get them to teach 6 with the, I mean, there's gotta be something more than just we have a job. How are we gonna be successful in this, in getting that sort of buy-in?
Well, I think we would reach out. We would have to reach out to organizations of Chinese teachers,
Yep.
schools that train teachers to be Chinese teachers, as opposed to we're just going to take anybody that speaks Chinese.
Okay.
We
And wait
want
for them
somebody
to
that's
come to us.
trained. We
Yeah.
want somebody that's trained
Yep.
and that understands our school system, and they exist.
So, just to verify that this is possible, I have started Mandarin programs in 2 previous districts that have both been very, very successful. And it always is more difficult at first to find the right teacher match, because it's a part-time teacher, obviously. I think at best we'll have 2 sections, so it would be a .4 teacher. If we had a tremendous number of students who wanted to do it, possibly a .6 teacher. But again, the College Board and the Hanban Institute sponsor trips every year for teachers, Chinese teachers, to go to China and meet with other teachers who are American Chinese teachers, American Mandarin teachers, and share strategies and resources. There's also an opportunity that I could write a grant to even send Anna to go and meet with other foreign language heads and travel around China and get some cultural. Dennis would like to go as well. I actually went on one of these Hanban trips several years ago, 5-6 years ago now, with a group of educators from New England, and there were some foreign language department heads on the trip. When I was in Medway, we partnered with Bryant College, Bryant University. They have a strong Chinese program. We're in a great geographic location. There are other colleges, local colleges with very strong Chinese Mandarin programs, Chinese cultural artifacts. They're great places for our kids to go. You know, the Salem, the museum in Salem has a wonderful Chinese collection. So I think there are a lot of good resources for our students who might be interested in studying Mandarin. But it does take a nurturing director to work with a teacher who's fairly new, who's a native speaker who may not have taught in American schools before.
Dennis might have a comment.
And then Dennis might have some, he just wants to put in a plug to go to China to the Hanban.
My wife is Chinese, and the trick in my children are fluent in Mandarin, and they're 10-year-olds, and they've been taking Mandarin since they're like 4, and that's what we speak at home, but they take it with the Lexington Chinese School over in Belmont. Has been around for 30 years, and the trick is not to get somebody who can teach Mandarin. The trick is to get somebody who's proficient in English, and that's really the struggle. A person who can speak clearly and pass the MTEL. This passing the MTEL is not as easy as you'd imagine, being a native Chinese speaker, because of all the grammar and the conjugating of verbs and whatnot. So the relationship building with a school in China for at least piloting and getting people over, and then helping them with the MTEL and having them be proficient enough in English is really where you start.
So the thing that surprised me when I went to visit Chinese schools, I visited Chinese elementary schools and middle schools and high schools in 2 different provinces, and many of the students I spoke with spoke better English than I do. And so There are many educated folks from China who want to come here and teach Mandarin to our students who have good English language skills as well. And so I think we will be challenged, but not significantly challenged to find someone if we were to be able to fund this year.
You mentioned .4. Do you envision that at the middle school and high school? Is that a one position for both schools to start, or?
So my experience in previous districts has been that when you start a Mandarin program at the high school, it almost always fails. Because the students are already invested in another language, and their schedules are very full. It's difficult to pick up a second language. What I would say is I would advocate building the program slowly from 6th or 7th grade up. If there are students who are interested next year at the high school, there won't be enough to run a class. So we will continue to run the online version.
So that .4 is just the middle school?
That's just the middle school. That would be 2 classes at the middle school.
So eventually we might move up to a full-time Mandarin teacher once it moves up through the high school?
My goal in the end would be to have a full-time Mandarin teacher at each school, to have enough students to run 5 sections at each school.
I think Cindy had a question.
Thanks.
Very patient.
That's all right. So Anna, what I see is there are really 4 requests here, or 4 different initiatives. One is move it down to 6th grade.
Yes.
One is to move to this proficiency-based.
Yes.
One is to offer Mandarin at some point. And then really the 4th piece seems to be around getting more resources so we can do a better job recruiting, so that all of our world language teachers are really excellent, right? Because we want to make sure that what we're already offering is excellent.
Right.
And that's, I know that recruiting all of our foreign language teachers has been a challenge in the past. And so to think that we're going to have that improve is going to take some resources. So all that being said, and I know that you guys had a consultant that came in and worked with you, and the work on the committee as well. If you had to prioritize those 4 initiatives, if we were to say, hey, listen, this is too much for us to do in 1 year. We really want to focus first on expanding it down to the 6th grade level, or what we really want to do is we really want to focus on our hiring, or we really want to focus on proficiency based, make sure we have enough money for professional development so everyone's doing that well. Sort of how do you rank those in terms of moving forward?
They're all interrelated, but I would really
They
like
are.
to see that 6th grade program.
First.
Yes.
And as a full year, not even as a semester-long program.
Correct.
Okay. And then from there, your second sort of
And
priority.
professional development is a constant, ongoing thing. It's not something that you say we're not going to do.
Yep. But I mean specifically around the proficiency based.
The department's already gone and moving in that direction, and will only get stronger in that area. Every world language teacher is working on that right now at McCall, and I can't speak for the high school.
Oh, also at the high
Also
school.
at the high school,
Yeah.
and they're just continuing to update their curriculum to add more of that proficiency language assessments and teachings.
Yeah. So the freeze on the professional development isn't impacting that at all
No?
right now?
So we don't have a freeze on professional development. We have, we've expended our budget for reimbursement for teacher courses by contract. We have 80,000.
But these don't apply to that?
So, no, we have other funds that we provide use for professional development in the district. You want to explain that?
Yeah, for in-house professional development, but outside workshops is in that same line as the cap that we.
Right. So the curriculum work is budgeted for in our own budget in terms of the proficiency-based model.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So Susan, I thought of one last question, if I may, but I also want to say, I thought Cindy's question was excellent. I just want to be sure I understand. So if that .4 is going to cost something, the 2.0 is going to cost something, what I heard you say is, if we had to really parse it out, your preference would be take the Spanish, the Italian, the French we have, push it down to 6th grade,
First.
tackle Mandarin in another budget cycle, if we had to. I mean, we'd like to do it all. Is that how I heard it? Your number one
I think we
priority?
should-
Take what we have, push it to 6th?
do the whole sixth
I
grade.
think that was your question.
Right.
That
but
was my question.
Just to be clear, the 2.4 is for the sixth grade teachers. Whether some of it is Mandarin or something else, you still need 2.4.
To cover all the
Because you still
Cover
have
all the
same
sixth
number of
grade.
kids that
No, I
need to
hear
be
that,
served.
but in terms of
Yeah.
focusing our attentions and our
Yeah.
resources and our time
And hiring and all that.
hiring and the
Yeah.
rest of it, you know. We ask a lot from our teachers, and so the question is always, what's the bullseye and
Right.
what are the needs and what are the wants? And so what I'm hearing you say is that the need is drop it to 6, stay with what we have, do a really good job with what we have first, and then add.
I'm not sure that that's the
Are those
would be the
exclusive
recommendation. I don't think they're
things?
exclusive. I don't
Okay.
think they're two different things. I mean, I guess one of the things Chris asked was, if we had a multi-year budget plan for this, what would it cost to revise the curriculum next year? Because once you've added sixth grade, then you've got sort of a domino effect. So, adding the non-Western language, modern non-Western language, could be done at seventh grade without adding the sixth grade, and would be a smaller cost because you would add an additional teacher and then the remaining students would be spread out among the existing world language teachers. We don't want to have any existing language teachers not to lose their jobs or be reduced in numbers of sections, but we could spread out the students and add 1 or 2 sections of Mandarin at seventh. That's not ideal because then you have to go back and rewrite the curriculum the next year. And then you've got to run
Right.
different, you sort of have a group of kids who are at a different place. But in terms of having students go through and not have the opportunity to make that choice, if we could not afford the sixth grade program, I would still advocate for putting Mandarin at the seventh grade.
So the operational question that occurred to me, Susan, was that I'm not really familiar with the professional relationship Tom Haber has with the curriculum coordinator in math at McCall, but there is one. And my sense is I think we don't have a curriculum coordinator for foreign language.
Correct.
So this is sort of an expansion, and we're broadening the number of languages that are offered, and this idea of sort of transitioning to the proficiency-based model. Is this a kind of change that you feel you could support on your own as the director? Is there a role for a curriculum coordinator? Is there something almost like I'll label it
ask.
overhead position that would be helpful to kind of manage this?
We do have that already planned as a budget ask.
We have been asking for a world language curriculum leader.
I've seen that ask come 4 or 5 years, but it never makes it to the final recommendation, so that's why
Hoping
I'm
this
asking.
is the year.
This is the year? Okay,
That's
so there may
outside
be a
of this.
request, but
It's a
George,
stipend,
separate and
yeah,
apart
position.
from this, you're saying?
Right. But it's
Okay.
that's just a stipend, the same as the
Yeah.
other departments get small
Team
stipends.
leaders, curriculum leaders, it's all the same stipend.
We did add additional stipended positions at the middle school, as I recall. Jen, help me out on this one. What did we
Not
add?
at the middle school, at the elementary, we.
Team leaders,
did
maybe?
Grade levels at the elementary and STEM point people at the elementary.
I seem to recall we made a choice to add something at the middle school, but I can't remember what it was last year. But Anna has been asking for the 3 years that I've been here to have the department coordinated. It is a smaller, it's a smaller number of teachers, but if we are to expand the program, that even lends more credence to that. But it is a small dollar amount. I can't recall what the stipend is,
$2,802,
something like that, small
I
stipend.
think.
So could you just clarify that the 132,000 for the
Mhm.
2.4 FTE new grade 6 teachers, that would be for the existing languages and Mandarin, or just how does that work out?
Including, so if you were to take the incoming grade 6 class,
Yep.
and how many sections of world language would we have to offer to ensure that every student who was going to take world language, we had a section for him or her? We would need the equivalent of 2.4, 2.6 I wouldn't mind either, by the way, but 2.4 FTEs. And then it's a matter of,
What do they teach?
what are we going to be offering? So if we were to not add Mandarin and just fill that with French, Italian, and Spanish, well, what happens when we want to add Mandarin? We now have to remove a French, Italian, and Spanish. We're reducing FTEs there to replace with Mandarin. So think of it as,
a little tricky.
we have 2.4 world language we want to fill. What we fill it with is who we hire.
Okay. That's helpful, thanks.
Yeah.
I think Dennis said he was gonna pick up the Mandarin, so you'll be teaching the Mandarin classes, right?
Are there existing teachers that would fill those spots for us, or would we be hiring all new teachers?
We do
for
have
this?
some part-time teachers who would be looking to increase their FTEs for sure, but we would have to hire some additional staff as well, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, last question.
Yep.
Sorry.
It's okay. You know, you waited.
You're asking really good questions.
At what point do we have to have someone hired and on board to know whether or not we're going to move forward with the Mandarin program?
So I can commit to you that I will have a qualified Mandarin
No,
teacher.
that wasn't my question. My question is when? Meaning, would we say that we want to make sure that we have someone on board by June 1st in order to be able to prepare the program, to be able to walk in the door in September, I don't know what our calendar says, 5th,
Right.
to start the Mandarin program at the middle school if we did that? Because if we don't have a person by that date, we would still be able to have time to hire or up other resources.
Right. I think that's a great question. So one of the things that I've been working with Lori Kirby on around general guidelines for hiring is that any known vacancies, I would like to have advertised as anticipated openings by the first week in February. And so if we had support for this, I would encourage Anna to start gathering resumes, interviewing people, and have someone in place in March or April, tentatively, if we thought the budget could provide for it, and if we were committed to making sure that happens. What gets more difficult is if we have to wait to town meeting and we're kind of duking it out over the budget and we're not sure whether we can afford this. I would say this is something I would not recommend moving ahead with unless we're committed to making sure that it happens. And so, but the thing that I have admired so much about Anna is she has frequently filled positions that I think are impossible to fill. And she pulls a rabbit out of a hat every time where someone has a medical issue or is on leave, and we need to have one section of French here and one section of Italian here, and she finds the person who can do both, and she puts it together, and she's a miracle worker. So what's the kind of drop dead date for this? I would say, because other school districts already have a Mandarin curriculum written, and I already know what the materials could be that we would use, it wouldn't take a lot of work to implement that. We could go as late as into the summer if we had to, I guess, and still be successful. But my strong preference would be hire someone in the spring, go out early.
Would that be enough time to let our students know to fill the program?
That was part, that was
That's another
So
question.
when we assign courses to middle school language students, they have to write down their first, second, and third choices.
Correct.
And so they don't know what language they've had selected until when.
Honestly, June.
Yeah. So,
Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's good questions. All right.
so no decision tonight, but that's just sort of planting the seed, and when we do the budget, my budget proposal will include this, and then we'll see whether it's something that we have the revenue to fund.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much for staying late.
Thank you.
So while Anna's
for all your
here,
hard work
do
on
we
this.
want to do the CASIC?
Yes, why don't we do that? Thank you for suggesting that.
So one more,
It's a gift, right?
right, this is a gift,
Grant.
it's the CASIC grant. So one of the most wonderful benefits of having Anna involved as the director, coordinator of the department, is that she has brought a tremendous gift of Italian to the district in terms of expanding the Italian program, making it very high quality, and partnering closely with CASIT, which is the organization that supports Italian language study. And it seems like every time I open my mail, we have another check from CASIT that Anna has finagled and brought to us. And so there's another one tonight. Anna arranged for me to be invited to a gala that CASIT had put on.
I'm glad you disclosed that, yes.
And I went to the gala. Well, the interesting thing about the gala was there's a silent auction, and being the good doobie that I am, I went and
Did you bid on the red Ducati motorcycle? Is that what you're telling us?
you saw that picture?
I saw it in the pictures.
Yeah, it was great. I bid on 2 dinners in the North End, thinking, oh, this is an early bid. you know, I'm not going to get both of them for $200 each. I'll just, you know, be a good doobie, and maybe I'll get one, and maybe I won't, but I did my bit.
Started too high.
I won both. So if anyone, I have, you
Eating well
know,
in
two healthy gift certificates for dinner in the North End if anybody wants to go. Duly paid for. So anyway, so the most recent one, Anna, can you just summarize what this one is? This is the $5,000 one?
Yes.
Yeah.
What is it for?
Yeah.
What are you going to use it for? Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I would like to do is have a field trip with some of the Italian students in April. In April, there's going to be an Italian day at Northeastern University, and we've been invited. And one of the things is a competition. I like to win. The competition is between schools, and the students have to prepare skits or songs. They could do like pretend interviews, and they present, and a panel of professors and people that are culturally engaged in the Italian language and culture judge and give prizes to the schools that they think perform the best. And the theme this year is literature. So you have to take something from literature and either do a skit or a short play or a song or something like that. So I would like to take some of our students to participate in that. It's a whole day of Italian culture and fun and meeting other kids and using the language outside of the classroom. And this would pay for their bus, anything they need to go on this trip. That's one thing that we would use it for.
Great.
And perhaps extra materials and things for our students.
So I'm happy to make a motion to accept with great gratitude a grant in the amount of $5,000 from CASET to continue to support our Italian language program in Winchester.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank
This
you.
was fun. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Grazie tanto.
Oh,
There you go.
I forgot that you were Italian.
That's about
Next
all I
time,
know.
bid on the Ducati.
So,
Ciao.
thinking
Ciao.
that we should do the proposed course changes
Yes.
with Dennis and George.
They're just jumping all over the place.
Mr. Haber, sorry, yeah. I'm
What
just
page
trying
are we
to-
on?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay.
So, welcome.
George, you want to go first?
Sure, sure. So, giving you a preview of what the proposed McCall Middle School Program of Studies for next year will look like, and what we wanted to do is highlight for you any significant changes that'll be forthcoming. The first is world languages. I think we can all check that box. Talked about that. Math, there's no real proposed changes coming for next year, but I just wanted to put in a plug for the work that's been done as part of the math curriculum review, and we're investigating the opportunity to create more of an integrated math program in 7th and 8th grade, which would then feed into the proposed integrated math program in 9th grade. So that's coming to a theater near you soon. The final piece, the third bullet, is really science. 2016, the frameworks were updated in science. Instead of it being a layer cake, which is what we presently did, general science in grade 6, life sciences in grade 7, and earth science in grade 8, it's more of teach all of the sciences in pieces in each of the grades, and you're able to expand upon that area. So the themes, and that's how it's described, is structure and function in grade 6, systems and cycle in grade 7, and cause and effect in grade 8. And essentially, all of the sciences would be taught in each of those 3 grades, and therefore would be more of an integrated science curriculum. And what it really means for our teachers is a little bit of trading. This unit that I taught in 8th grade, here you go for 6th grade, but let's make it age appropriate and let's do some trading this way and that. So that's really what the science program is looking like. 6th grade is already doing it this year, 7th grade would do it next year, and 8th grade would do it the following year. So the program of studies will reflect what's being taught in those 3 grades. But the same thing's being taught over 3 years, and we're still going to be tested on MCAS only in grade 5 and 8. And 10 for science. But that's really
As of
what's
right
coming.
now.
As of right now. As of right now,
As
yeah.
of right now, that's when we're tested. But part of the discussion about having to do this move is we don't know what it'll be like down the line. And the NGSS, the Next Generation Science Standards, strongly recommended that they have this integrated model.
I just want to commend Jen for inspiring the middle school science teachers to change some long-established
It was a whole team,
sequence.
and they've really embraced it, and they've been doing a lot of work with it. So
Particularly, what grade? 6th grade has been
Sixth
very,
grade,
very
right, they
energetic
jumped
in
on
this
for this
regard.
year.
Flagships.
Yeah,
Flagships.
it's a great. The 6th grade science team is a great team.
Jen, can you just highlight like the top 3 benefits of why we're doing this? Just for people who
yeah, so I
haven't been
think
following.
that the way we've done lots of things in education, this was similar to more like the silo approach. So kids couldn't necessarily make the connections, like they thought, biology and earth science and chemistry were all very different things and couldn't necessarily connect with the themes. So I think that's a huge piece is the more of that thematic approach and seeing how things connect, which isn't just for science, but we hope that they see for everything. I think one of the other big things is with the new standards, the real focus is on kind of the thinking process and thinking differently about science versus the memorization and kind of the giving back of information, more thinking like a scientist, as we call it, with their guiding principles with that. So I think that's another huge benefit from it. And I also think there's been a lot of, at the building level, a lot of work with kind of collaborating now between the grades, which they all had very different expertise that I think now is being shared more. They've always worked well as a department, but being shared more because the curriculum now overlaps. So I think that's been a huge benefit too.
One more benefit I think it could be a very important benefit for middle school is that when you organize more thematically, as you can see, structure and function, systems and cycles, there are more opportunities for integrating cross-content, science and math, science and literature, than there were in the past when it was so, this is the unit on how many kinds of rocks there are, and, not a lot of crossover.
Excellent point. And that's identified in the standards as well.
Does it also release us from being so text-driven?
Yeah, that's a good
Yes.
Textbook-driven, it creates more opportunities for team-based and
Exploration, collaboration.
independent exploration as well.
Which leads me to the next question. What kind of curriculum developments is happening around that, and where are they pulling their content from? Because, as Cindy mentioned, if we're being less textbook driven, then I assume we're having to create a lot of content ourselves, and what's the process for that? And
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the biggest debated pieces, right? What to do about textbooks or software, or really how to go about it. And they've been a couple times to, thank you, George, for constantly making these schedule adjustments. Is it Newton? Is Jenny in Newton or Needham? Newton is where they've been going, yeah. So they really, they have a middle school unbelievable coordinator there who just believes in sharing with all of us, not just their districts. So she's been amazing helping us with this whole process and freely sharing that our teachers go and observe. And so they developed their own, and our teachers were kind of inspired by that because they were so good with that piece. So they're working with them again now that they're partway through the year to keep doing that. So they're building a lot of their own units with multiple resources. We've piloted 2 different kinds of software in the past couple of years too for them to try in place of kind of the traditional text. That's still in discussion and debate for some of the other grades feel pretty strongly that they want a text. So I think that's part of what we're talking about with that piece.
so that's still kind of ongoing.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
continual review
Yeah,
kind of process.
exactly.
And
I mean, I
curriculum, is never fixed.
Right.
It's
We're done.
always ever changing.
Yeah. Well, and I think people like to have a source, like a book to have that resource, but they're so outrageously expensive. It makes it hard to use it just as one resource, because we can't even afford that, then never mind technology choices.
$150 a student.
Yeah,
right.
it's ridiculous. It makes my kids' college books look cheap, which is crazy.
That was gonna be one of the questions, I think, is what's the budget impact, or what are we talking here for any of this, so.
So the beauty of doing sort of a cross-district sharing of resources and pulling from existing resources is that you're not doing a textbook acquisition. So the cost is spread out over a longer period of time. There is some money in there for software.
Software, and grade 6 is asking for, one class set of books that they can use as a resource, but they don't really use textbooks in grade 6 at all.
And so that's still
They
in
just
there.
want
That's in the budget.
resources, Yeah.
And there's money in the PD budget for the support of the building of the units and
To write curriculum.
Okay. Anyone else want to ask anything?
Okay. So George, you'll come back with the documents in your program of studies.
Whenever you tell me you want it.
Okay. Thank you.
It's already been worked on. Yeah, we'll have it ready whenever you want.
Ready for high school?
Yeah, ready for high school.
So Tom Haver is here, you might see, as fortunately he now lives nearby, so he doesn't have to drive to Brooklyn or anywhere tonight. And Dennis is going to present the proposed changes to the program of studies. Anna's staying because there are a couple of changes in world language. Dennis will, you want to come up and sit, Tom? The new math course for 9th grade is one that we need to describe, and this is another integrated approach that I think is pretty innovative.
We have a graphic for that as well, but I'd like to cover a couple of the
Sure.
quicker hits first. Just to wrap up the world languages, what we've had traditionally at the high school is different sections of Spanish 1, Spanish 2. We've had Spanish 1, language and culture, Spanish 1A, Spanish 2A, 2B. We've been moving away from that because we want kids to be able to take Spanish 1, Spanish 2, Spanish 3, and same thing with Italian in all of our languages. So what we're trying to do for next year is to get away from all the subsections and have kids be able to go through a natural progression. This ideally will help with kids coming up from the middle school. They'll start with the Spanish 2, but if you start with Spanish 1, you should naturally be able to take Spanish 2 at the high school. We're working on that, and that'll be the proposal in our program of studies. The same thing for Latin as well, in terms of what that'll create is a group of kids that will be much more proficient, more than likely, than other kids in the class, or they might not be as comfortable with the language. So we will have to move to a level 2 honors CP model. So while we're getting away from the real subsections, which really did track students and kept them sort of on one path, we're looking into offering a CP and honors at the level 2 section for all of our languages, which is what we do at levels 3, 4, and so forth. Just because in the classroom, if you are taking a language in middle school, you will be more proficient than if you've never taken a language. But you should be able to move up and down with comfort from honors to CP, CP to honors as you go through the program. So that'll be a proposal for world languages in our program of studies.
And as we move towards a proficiency-based model, I think the honors and CP will go away.
It will eventually blend away.
Right, and there may be an honors option or a advanced option within a course, which we do now anyway.
We do a tremendous job. I think world languages, it's very unique. We have a lot of part-time staff, and we have a lot of sections that meet overlapping. So if you were to look at our schedule, just at a bird's eye view, you'd see like, oh, Anna Tyrone only has 15 or 10 kids in that class. But that's not in actuality. In that class, she has 10 kids at a CP level, but she also might have 8 or 9 kids at an honors level meeting at the same time, and that's where they differentiate the curriculum. In terms of differentiating curriculum in a classroom, there's nobody that's more proficient at that than our world language teachers. It's really impressive. So yes, we will move away from that once we become more comfortable, or that'll be discussed in part of a plan, once we become more comfortable with the proficient model.
So can I ask, the reason why we wanted to get this in front of us kind of early was that we were interested, better way to say it, in any schedule of courses changes at McCall or the high school that would have a budget impact before we vote FY 19. So maybe just taking these in groups, since you started off with world language, are these proposals, are they budget neutral? Is there a cost, in other words, distinguishing between honors and CP maybe is budget neutral, same number of teachers, it's how you divide up the kids.
Prepared to say that they're budget neutral.
Okay. And then just to be sure I understand as well, so I think it was 2 years ago, Mr. Gonzalez actually requested, and he got 0.2 FTE to add a French section at McCall. And then I think we added into the high school schedule French 1, but there just wasn't enough interest to run it. Because I don't see it added or dropped. Am I right in thinking it stays in the book, that there, in case enough kids opt to take French 1? I see Anna nodding her head. Okay, so that's good, it's there, if the interest is there.
Right. And we also have Italian 1 and Spanish 1, so, and Latin 1.
Which we've had, it's just the French was sort of a new, I think we
Yeah.
had it years ago, went away, and we were trying it again. Okay, thank you.
The other new offerings would be in art. The art program would like to offer 2 honors level classes, 1 in ceramics and 1 in drawing and painting. 2, so that you're creating a portfolio. Your kids that are really looking to go to college for art are spending time, in their only semester courses, but spending time to create a college level ready portfolio. So 10 items, 15 items that you would actually bring to a college application process. So that's for our advanced art students. Again, we don't anticipate that would be, we do anticipate that would be cost neutral.
Okay.
That's another department that sometimes has multiple classes in the same classroom at the same time. So if you only had a few kids who wanted to do ceramics honors, they could be in with regular ceramics kids at the same time. It's not necessarily a significant budget impact.
Students who right now are already working on portfolios, but not really getting credit for that advanced work. So a student, in ceramics, you can see a kid working at an introductory level, and then students making some just amazing professional-looking work that they could absolutely sell if they hung out a shingle and wanted to become a professional artist. So in order to kind of differentiate between those two for credit and for coursework, it's something that we'd like to offer, based off of student feedback as well.
So can I ask a question? There are a couple classes that we have, that one that I can come up with at this hour in my head is the Shakespeare one, where a student enrolls in it, and when they enroll in it, they make the choice whether or not they want it to be college prep or honors based on how they think they're doing. If they can take on more homework, so they read 5 chapters instead of 3. I don't know exactly how it works, but you don't have to move your schedule around depending on why you're doing that. Why wouldn't we do that here? Is this just creating the opportunity to put an H or CP next to that item, or are we actually creating another class? Because
We're not necessarily creating another class.
Okay.
But they'll be working on more advanced work.
So it'll look more like the Shakespeare one,
Yeah.
where everyone's in the same class, you won't change your schedule around, you just make a choice as to what level of rigor you want.
Ideally, what you see is kids that are doing such high-level work, they're bringing up the kids that might not be your professional, your artists or your students that are desiring to be a professional artist. They might push them to do even better work.
So I think the other thing,
I mean, I think that's the,
Inspiring.
and it doesn't create the competition or the stigma, because you don't know who's taking it as an honors class versus.
not necessarily.
Oh, they talk.
Kids know.
They know, but it's not like you're
Okay.
shut out of a certain class because you
Right.
don't make the,
I mean,
you're not elite enough or
The,
something.
the thing
It's-
I like about the proficiency model is it moves us closer and closer to not having to have honors or
Right.
college prep levels. And so you can't get shut out of an honors class if there are too many kids in it. You always have that choice.
Right, I think it is a nice addition. The other thing, I think, for students who are applying to art school, it's nice to show a progression on their transcript. And so this is another way to differentiate. It's not like they're taking just ceramics
It's not like they're taking it over and over again.
over and over again. It kind of shows a little bit of a progression. So,
The next one is the big one. So something we're very proud of. We're always very proud of our math department. They're a highly recognized, highly successful department, and they're also the ones that never rest on their laurels. They're constantly trying to change and evolve, and I think that's a credit to Tom.
Do you want one?
In his
Easier enough.
inspiration of the department. So what they've been looking at for quite some time is a way to get away from tracking, where a kid can go back and forth from CP to honors and what have you, year to year, so they're not off. They're not missing a year, or they're never behind a year. And also, they look at what's going on with the MCAS, what's going on with AP, what's going on with SATs, what's going on in the world around us, and what is being valued mathematically, where is the world going, and what is being somewhat lesser valued. Things that are still important, but things that are moving towards the job market of the future. So what they've come up with is an acronym that Tom loves. It's called STAG, and realistically, it stands for statistics, because statistics have a high value right now in the workforce and in jobs. Technology, so we're also very proud that they're putting an emphasis on computer science and computer applications, algebra and geometry. And if you look at the progression, there is a need for more problem solving skills, more group work, something that traditional math classes it's very individual, just working on the problems and the proofs yourself. They like to get away from that. Statistics is really increasing in need. You're seeing that all over in just about any avenue, from politics to business to science.
Right.
You're seeing statistics being used or misused sometimes, and you need to know how to read that information, and as well as the computer applications and computer assisted instruction, where a lot of math is going, working online, working with computer science. So what you're also seeing is a little bit of a less emphasis on geometry and traditional algebraic problem-solving skills. That doesn't mean that they're not important. Certainly geometry is still important. If you're an architect or you just desire to be an artist of some type, geometry is going to play, as well as rocket science and a million other examples, it's going to play a major role. So students are still going to learn geometry, but the emphasis will be a little bit less. It is also that classic math class where a kid has been a great math student all across the line, or, because they're really good with algebraic equations, but then they get to geometry and it's like going from Spanish to French or Spanish to Mandarin for some students. For a whole year.
Yeah.
And it can trip up some of our strongest math students.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to highlight is we had approximately 25 students get perfect math SAT scores last year, and we're just
Statistically.
just
Ridiculous.
Statistically speaking, for AP, for a school of our size, we were ranked #1 for AP success rate in terms of taking AP exams. So for a school of close to 1,400 students, the amount of students that take AP exams, statistically speaking, we would rank #1 in terms of AP level success. We're very proud of the program. But they're not resting on what they're doing. So what you see in front of you is a graphic that has 4 levels, which is a little bit different than what we would normally go from, but there's no principles level. We're going from everything is college prep, and there's just degrees in depth of where students would start off. The highest level would be that honors math. That's really got the Algebra 2 and geometry and trig and statistics all in 1 year. That's for our students that can handle the highest level of math and are ready for it. A need that we're not exactly meeting right now with our kids that really, really have an aptitude for superior math skills. But we've gone away from the principles classes, so even if you take the entry-level math class, that is a college preparatory math class, something we're also proud of.
So the detail, though, is just for grade 9. Can you talk more about the out years that says TBD and what?
Sure.
So what are you looking to learn, and how do you envision that becoming clearer?
So one thing to remember
so this
is
flow chart would only apply to one class of kids, right?
So it's for the class of 2020.
Yeah.
2022, excuse me.
Yeah.
When you say it out loud, it's George Jetson, 2022. It's shocking. But so where they would go from there is, I think Tom could speak a little bit more.
Purposefully, in the program of studies book, the plan is to have this just for the class of 2022, and a big part of why it's not that we don't know what's going to happen the following year, but we haven't actually agreed on final names, but more importantly than that, it confuses all the people that are in 10th and 11th grade now, you follow, so that's a future thing, not something we want in the course of studies book now. What's there is just for 9th graders. Indeed, we're not changing the direction of where people are going to end up with this. All of the options are there as you would recognize them of what students would do through the 3 years, as they are now in the current program of studies books. But we're completely re-altering the structure with the creation of STAG and the integrated program in grade 9 for us to be able, as Dennis pointed out, to keep everyone at the same course, at the same grade level as they move through 9 and through 10, which is when, of course, we have the MCAS. So
Right.
everyone will stay on that, and it provides much more flexibility for ability to move and not be a year behind. It's a misnomer, of course, when they felt they're a year behind. They weren't a year behind. They simply weren't the year ahead that everybody else was. But this helps correct that and makes it work much better for flexibility, both for transfer students and students that suddenly come into their own. It'll have tremendous advantages there as well.
Our program of studies is basically ready to go. We're pretty proud of that as well. And the way we've put math together is you've got grades 10, 11, 12. That's what you'll see, and then you have ninth grade separated. So the graphics for 10, 11, 12 are still the same. The information is still the same. But then if you read further, looking specifically for ninth grade curriculum, that's essentially at the end of the math section. So hopefully not confuse anybody.
So just to clarify, the 10th grade math for the class of 2022 is likely to be another integrated class for some students, and some students will go right into pre-calc.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to clarify, in ninth grade, what we have is 3 levels of the program in ninth grade of STAG. 3 levels of STAG, an honors level, an advanced level, and a CP level. The 109 math course that you see listed at the top is named
It's really a
109
10th grade course.
because it's both 10th and ninth grade all taught together. We have always had a select group of students that finish their BC calculus as juniors, you follow, and this is now formalizing that, creating the structure for them to do both those courses as ninth graders. Of course, many of them have already done these courses multiple other places over the last several years, but this is where we put it together with that and then move on, and still have the flexibility for them to move or not move on, depending on whether it's appropriate, so that that's incorporated in as well. It's a ever-expanding movement nationally that at the elite private schools around the country and at select high schools as well, there are more and more students completing their BC calculus in the junior year, and then having the flexibilities of the other science courses that they want to take, the pre-med things they want to do, or more advanced math classes or engineering classes, of course, which we've offered for a good number of years already, for the additional courses that students can take. And all of that still stays, all of that stays with this. This is the restructuring of 9 and 10 that leads us into that.
But I want to emphasize this is not designed for the elite or the select. This is designed for flexibility for all.
Oh, absolutely.
So that was going to be.
So if you go back to George's sort of preview of coming attractions, when he said we're moving towards an integrated math program for 7th and 8th grade, that will be the next step. Next year, I would expect to see a proposal for an integrated math program for 7th and 8th grade. The thing that always concerns me about math is that we choose who our best math students are very early, and then it's hard for them once they're down the track. It's hard for other students to catch up, or it's hard for students to manage to have enough math to do the advanced science or engineering that they want to do later on if they didn't start off in the advanced, choosing the advanced, to participate in the advanced track. So this allows a level playing field where students can move up from an advanced to an honors, say in 10th grade, because they will have all been exposed to the same material, as opposed to having been in a completely different class, which is what always bothered me about non-integrated math. The other thing I think we've got to keep in mind is we don't really know what the new MCAS test is going to look like. It's going to be certainly more difficult for some students to gain proficiency. And there is a pathway for an integrated math test that we expect will be a better fit for our students than the current test.
We know the students in Winchester will excel.
They'll excel in any case, but I
and
think
we will do all we can to have all of them, and as Dennis brought up, the goal here is to help all students be their best self and be all they can be in mathematics. And this structure helps us with more flexibility of that and focuses on the new things that we want to spend more time on in statistics and in technology and in programming, as well as keeping an appropriate but somewhat lessened emphasis in geometry.
So just
which
being
very
eyes-
much fits with the curriculum.
But being eyes wide open about that, is it not fair to assume, if we go down this path, and I love everything I heard tonight, I mean, MCAS is kind of a rigid tool, even 2.0, maybe less so. When I think about kind of dropping algebra from is it sophomore level, is that right? And we're looking condensing it freshman. I mean, so students may be getting introduced to some concepts earlier than they had before, but not as deeply. And so might we expect to see some bump in the results of standardized testing? It seems to me we probably would. That doesn't mean it's bad. It speaks to your point, which is maybe we need to look at a different tool for assessment. So can you talk more about, when you say there's a pathway, is this sort of there's a DC initiative or an acknowledgement that there needs to be a different tool that would be in addition to or an alternative to MCAS 2.0? And is that like 5 years away? Is it
Right.
10 years away?
So Tom and I have had a lot of conversations about the MCAS because, as you probably know, our the 8th grade scores on the MCAS are not as strong as the 10th grade scores on the math MCAS because it's basically the same test or just a little bit revamped. It's really not even an Algebra 2 test. It's really arithmetic and a little bit of... How would you characterize the previous MCAS test in terms of where it would fit here in this?
I'm sorry, rephrase the question.
How would you characterize the high school MCAS test for 10th grade?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, it's something which a large portion of Winchester 7th graders could excel at already.
Right.
And that's part of what we have. It doesn't mean that everyone's there, and it doesn't mean that there aren't a lot that we do with everyone, because again, what we're here is trying to help each student be all they can be, all they want to be, and all that's best, and provide a structure in order to do that. We're not going to change the fact that some students are going to know a whole lot more mathematics than others are. You follow? I mean, there's going to be this complete range of students, and we're here to help all of them accomplish all of that. No, we don't know exactly what the state's going to do. What we do know is certainly it is the ACTs and SATs and all of the AP exams or the international baccalaureates that indeed are the measuring sticks for the universities to move on. And it's not, in a school like Winchester, for us, that's not just talking about the elite students, that's talking about half the school, if I, or more, who are involved at those levels with taking these courses. But at the same time, it's teaching all students the mathematics to have them ready for the mathematics that they need when they're studying at university level, which indeed comes back to algebra, which indeed we start teaching algebra, of course, now in elementary school and in 6th grade, and of course, a big part of 7th and 8th, and it's what's used throughout.
Yep.
Much of the further more advanced mathematics isn't used anywhere near as much, except for students who are in more specialized fields.
Right. So our concern is we don't really know what the new MCAS 2.0 is going to be. The state frameworks call for an integrated pathway and a test that matches that.
But they have both. I mean,
they have both.
They have both, and we don't know whether they're going to keep both or drop one. What we do know is that the vast majority of performing high schools do not teach integrated, teach a standard approach. On the other hand, several of the strongest schools that we would tend to be with do indeed have an integrated approach. Lexington just went through switching to an integrated approach just a few years ago and has just completed and phased out. And I should say, we will have a few bumps on the road in the year of doing this because there will be parents and people concerned who will need to understand just what's happening with some of this. It's not completely smooth, but it has a lot of benefits, and therefore it makes sense to look at it. And we've kind of created our own model for it, keeping a lot of the geometry that we want, but accomplishing the most important parts of keeping everyone on track. Winchester High School is plenty big enough to have all students move through at each grade level. I should say, at the same time, the math department, just like modern language department, is very much looking at the proficiency education and what's taking place in it right now. And there are a lot of fascinating things going on. This is a pendulum. This is not something new. It's been around for 100 years. But it is swinging back in and has a lot of great things that can be done with it, and we're certainly looking there, and we may have a proposal someday soon of ways to do that, because we're working on what we can do there.
So I have one last question about testing. Are there mathematics SAT subject tests?
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Are.
Yes,
So-
math, that's the test that Dennis was referring to, the math. SAT level 2, there are actually
Level
2
2.
levels of
Okay.
the subject test in mathematics.
Okay.
SAT level 1 and SAT level 2 math, and that's the one that covers basically all the math that we teach through middle school and high school.
Okay.
And students take it when they complete their pre-calculus course in 11th grade if that's when they do it, or 10th grade if that's when they complete it. And that's what we
You don't
regularly
envision
have.
this would negatively impact sort of student preparedness
No,
for
no,
that
it's all,
subject test?
all planned and in place for that to happen, as
Great.
well as, of course, all the APs. And of course, our newer APs in computer science have also been fantastic, successful, wonderful programs that have been developed by, in the last couple of years that are brand new. And of course, we have that one running. And it's one of the kind of things that we're very anxious to see is just how many people are going to want to do that next year. We don't know. It's kind of been a new thing, so we're watching what's going to happen.
That was what I was going to ask, if this would impact people's access to the computer programming. Not at all. I mean, would this impact?
No, the only thing that it will do is, you can see in the STAG with the technology, in the description of the course, many of you may be familiar with the Hour of Code that we do at all grade levels, a national program that's from kindergarten on up. We're going to incorporate into STAG a full 2-week follow-up to the Hour of Code, which will be programming in STAG in 9th grade. So indeed, giving students the introduction of that in a little bit more in depth and where it can go from there, so that they then have the other 2 AP computer science options, a little more knowledge about them than what they've read in the book. That's actually been a fabulous program nationally with bringing exposure, and we really enjoyed having it here. We're going to expand it in STAG.
It's all still budget neutral?
Is it still?
There's a
Budget
slight
impact?
increase, a slight increase for materials and supplies. And,
But $5,000 that cover additional licenses, that we will have software licenses with that expanded more than we had in the past, but it's not anything of,
And it's not a whole new set
not
of
different,
textbooks?
not different courses and not different, no, and we can use the materials that we have from different courses we've already used and that we've already developed in order to put them together, but there are a few little things put in there.
We did have a committee look at textbooks. There aren't good textbook matches
Right.
for this kind of program.
You really can't, the integrated market, put my old publisher's hat on, the integrated market just isn't there. There aren't enough schools that do this and go this way, despite the fact that national leadership's been advocating this for 40 years. I mean, this is not new, but there are select people who have gone that way, who've been successful with it, but they pretty much need to write your own or adopt what you have with it. But now, the beauty with the added of what computers can now do for us, indeed, the technology and the licensing that we'll have with the curriculum lets us pick and choose and put together the programs that we're excited about.
So Cindy, you had a couple of things.
I have a couple of questions, but not about math.
Oh.
Sure.
So,
For me, for Dennis.
Are we all done with math, or?
I think I'm all.
Ready for an overarching
Not
question?
that we don't love you, Tom.
We're done, ready to go.
He's
Only
excited.
talk math for so
I
long.
had a meeting with the middle school math teachers, middle school math teachers this afternoon, our department meetings, and I told them I was going to be here tonight, and they wanted to know if everything had been all approved and set, because of course the huge implication for them is the 8th grade teachers will be needing to make the recommendations of what courses will be in 9th grade, and we've been discussing, and there are, as you know, parent conferences coming up in another week. And I assured them it would be an all a go unless they got a frantic call tomorrow morning that there was some reason to be waiting, but as you say, it's virtually revenue neutral, so we're confident that
Great.
So, the power of weighting grades makes honors important for these students because they look at their GPAs quite a bit. Are we moving in any direction away from weighting grades? Yes, no?
We have not.
We had no conversation?
We've had conversation about just about everything. We've had some wild conversations, but they're just conversations.
Okay, and then along those lines, one of our beacons is around individual pathways for success, and so encouraging students to explore those things they're most passionate about. Do we see a program of studies where people can do independent studies for honors credit? Because I think currently they're only college prep.
Again, we've talked about where credit could come from and how we can apply credit, and everything's on the table.
Okay.
For sure.
Because that might be.
I love independent studies.
That might be an obstacle. I heard that was an obstacle for students doing more independent studies, is they couldn't get the honors credit for it, and so it affects.
in math, we have the honors credit for it, but we don't in any of the other ones, because the math ones are in the course of studies book as
Courses.
Yeah.
Right.
You follow? So
So I guess what I'm hearing, Dennis, is a request to look at the description for independent study
Sure.
and see if you can consider an honors option. and then define what that might look like?
I mean, I assume that's a budget neutral issue, so
Correct.
it's not like we have to
Right.
Yeah.
figure that out now, but. And then, this isn't probably the right time for it, but, I just wanna throw out, I was really sad to hear we're not doing the June term next year.
Say it again.
And that we're
Not
not
doing-
doing the June term next
Oh.
year, that it's been postponed.
The June
another-
Academy?
I
Yeah.
can, I can speak to that in some detail if you'd like.
So my question is that solely budgetary, or it's just a timing issue and?
It is, I'm at a year and a half here.
Yeah, I know.
And we don't wanna push too much too fast.
Yeah.
What we were able to get in is the wind block. So
Yeah.
how much do you wanna do right away versus how much do we wanna take our time? The wind block, which is, obvious, it seems on the surface it stands for Winchester, but it's actually an acronym for what I need. I can talk at length about it if you'd like me to come back, but realistically, what it's about is giving kids choice, giving them options, and giving them that break during the middle of the week for a little bit of downtime, reflection, support, extra help, enrichment, what I need. We want them to be able to choose what they need while we're coaching them a little bit, because some students might choose to take a nap. But if they need to take a nap, that sounds shocking during the school day, but if that's gonna help them through the rest of the day, the rest of the week, we have to have that discussion. Maybe that's appropriate. In order for us to wrap our minds around this schedule change, because it does change our schedule, we decided to go with this first, because there's instant impact. The June Academy, we know that there will be impact, but it's a little bit further down the road. And so as a faculty, we discussed where do we wanna go in terms of the immediate impact versus taking our time with the June Academy. And wind block is where we're going. June Academy is not off the table. It's part of the discussion. We will be taking another faculty vote early next year about that, and we already have a timeline where we would be accepting submissions for different types of curriculum starting next January, so that people can work on their curriculum and work through it and have plenty of time. We also would have been the third school in the Commonwealth to adopt June Academy, and that's something very proud of, being able to lead and not follow. But the June Academy and the other school that just went through it, they have to make some tweaks, they have to make some adjustments, and teachers talk amongst themselves, town to town. There's another town going through it this year, and we'd like to see them go through it because it's a similar size school. It's Concord Carlisle. See what they're gonna do with it, and then take the, I don't want to say mistakes, but take the lessons learned from the other schools and then apply it to us. We still have a strong movement for it. There is a lot of worry and trepidation though, from our faculty, which isn't unfounded, because they're worried about change, like everybody usually is, and they're worried about the impact on the curriculum and what it means in the classroom and the speed at which they may or may not have to cover things, or if they have to cut things out, or whether it affects mid-years or finals. A lot of questions which we are prepared to answer, but one thing at a time. And Win Academy gives us the immediate give to the students that we think that they need right now, rather than something a year and a half from now. So it's definitely still a baby of mine that I want to pursue, and the faculty, we have a whole committee that's dedicated to this, and it's not going away.
There's a lot of very strong support.
And let us know if there's something, even if it's in the second half of next year, you need resource-wise to make that.
Sure, thank
For
you.
planning.
Yeah.
We also have a NEASC visit next year. It's
So
another.
when Megan
Stressor.
when Megan Jens talks and you say, well, there's a lot going on, that's the iceberg. That's the iceberg model. The NEASC is a huge component, and that a lot of our faculty is doing a lot of hard work for that, and that's we're grateful for their effort. So that's not something that's small.
Thank you.
Any other feedback before we send them on their way?
Just have a broad question for Dennis. It just follows an observation. I'd be remiss if I didn't say it's another year where we're not offering journalism at Winchester High School, which just pains me, because we had it once upon a time.
Someone
And
can
I
do it
won't ask you.
independently, though.
What?
Someone can do it independently.
And we do have, if you read my blog,
There is a newspaper.
We are offering, we are promoting a journalism contest. That's a national
wonder who suggested
contest to
that.
see if we can gauge interest. That's been promoted amongst the faculty,
Yep.
as well as we put it out in the student announcements and in the blog and what have you. And we do have a student newspaper. We have two versions of the newspaper, by the way. We have the red and black online, and we also have the printed version. So there's definitely stories, students writing stories.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So my softball is, could you just describe for us the process that got you to tonight with these proposals? My understanding is we've moved away from the fall classic or the old model. How can you just share, how are you engaging with the directors and the teachers to come up with these suggestions?
Sure. Well, math almost works independently. Tom will come to me and say, I've got a great idea.
Yeah.
And we hash it out and talk about it. But the initial approach is earlier in the fall, we say, okay, we need to start to talk about scheduling, what we want to offer, what the kids are asking for, what do we need to do, what do we want to drop, what's not running. And then we just start to have the conversation, and we talk about it amongst ourselves. Could we do this? Could we try an honors level that? Should we not? And the directors, we work as a team, and they talk to the people in their departments, and they bring back their ideas, and it's pretty much, it's a very flexible process. I want to try new things. I want people to want to try new things, and I think, again, math sort of leads the way in that regard. And people just come with proposals, and if the budget has an impact on whether we can put things forward or not, and so we talk about that as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Some of the proposals come out of the curriculum review efforts, and I just want to say that Jen has been working closely with the directors around curriculum areas. Science was not an area, for example, that was scheduled to be under review, but because of this enthusiasm of the teachers and the next generation science standard, she kind of accelerated that. So we've had half a dozen meetings about the math over the last couple of years, pretty lengthy discussions. So I think we're all on board with it. Jen and I strongly support the move to integration. And I applaud Dennis. It's pretty courageous this early in his career as a principal to be taking on new initiatives. You heard Megan say there's an hour in between the two exams. That is huge. I mean, just small changes like that can diminish student anxiety and stress. I applaud Dennis and the team and the teachers for trying to address some of those things, and I think that this is a solid addition in the math department, and I'd like to continue to see more innovation, more courses that focus on collaboration and teamwork and cross-disciplinary courses over the next few years, and so we'll continue to work in that direction.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Happy New Year.
Appreciate it.
So,
Your financial.
I guess
Exams, Tom.
we're back up at the top,
We are.
and I guess we should do the mid-year financial report.
So at your place, one thing Ellen and I spoke about this afternoon was in your mid-year financial report, there is there are a number of transfers.
Yeah, okay.
And so it had not previously been our practice to make transfers periodically through the year, but to wait till the end of the year. And one of the things that Stacy at Town Hall has asked us to take a look at is tracking more closely, keeping the accounts current, not letting them go into deficit, making appropriate transfers, identifying the source of revenue or the account that from which you're taking the funding, so that you can make sure that at the end of the year you're at zero, ideally. And so that's been the practice in my previous districts and in Ellen's previous district. And so she comes tonight with a number of transfers. You can see that the net result of the transfers is a zero. In fact, so we've identified areas where we over budgeted or under budgeted, and we're making small adjustments to ensure that every spending decision is appropriate and is flexible to meet the needs of students and teachers and administrators. But that's what this summary is. So you can see there were other transfers that you've already approved, but this is the most recent transfers as of January 9th. So Ellen,
You have the floor.
set you up.
So the budget memo that accompanied the budget report does indicate that we currently have an unencumbered balance of $542,594,000. This does include and takes into consideration, when you look at your budget report, that there is a column towards the right of the page called projected encumbrances, and those are encumbrances that have not been made yet, but we are anticipating that will need to be encumbered at a later date, and that we will have expenditures from those lines. At this time, as Dr. Evans indicated, I have requested and prepared a list of transfers to bring all of our lines current. And once that is done, we will have no lines that are showing deficits as of January 2nd. And we are on target right now to meet our operating needs for the year, with the remaining amount of $542,594. We are closely monitoring all budget lines right now because we want to make sure that should we have additional areas of need in special education or other programming areas, that we are able to meet those needs. Okay.
Is there any way that we can move money so that there's more available for people to do out-of-district professional development coursework?
So,
Hit the max on that, which, have we ever hit the max on that?
we always hit the max.
We always hit the max.
So I would say, if you asked me today, I would say no. We have some pending out-of-district placements. We have some students in 45-day educational assessments. We have many rejected IEPs and mediations and hearings. And so, unfortunately, the number of teachers who asked for course reimbursement or took workshops brought us up to that $80,000 mark as provided in the contract mid-year. I've met with the union president to talk about monitoring it more closely and kind of giving quarterly updates to say, let's be sure that we expend it over the course of the year. And I would increase that amount if I had available funds, but we are watching every penny very closely. One of the things that is kind of in flux is the circuit breaker reimbursement. We could consider freeing up some funds if the state were to provide what we had originally anticipated for circuit breaker reimbursement at 75% and not 65%. We've lost $102,000 right off our budget that I had to find in other places because the circuit breaker reimbursement was less than the state typically gives us. They often give a second allocation, and the receipts are $800 million in December above their projections. So Susan and I had been communicating today, and I'd like you to vote to authorize her to send a letter to the legislature to ask that they make good on the promise to give us 75% reimbursement. And that would help free some funds for either special education expenses or a little bit of more teacher professional development. The other source of funding for that is our other generous community grant organizations, John and Mary Murphy, WIFI, the parent organizations. And I've asked the principals to speak to those groups and just give a heads up that it's a very tight budget year and that we haven't identified any surplus funds for those purposes. And so asking those groups to fund some targeted teacher workshops or coursework is something that I would like to partner with them on for this year. There are other sources of professional development funds, but they are in district and kind of spoken for, sort of bringing people in to do programs or running in district programs. We offer a lot of very low cost graduate courses here. Jen teaches several, Pam, Carolyn, and so it's just individual teachers who want to go on workshops that are of interest to them personally. That's the funding that we've kind of run out of.
So Chris, I know you had a couple questions.
I have a couple of questions and a comment. I'll start with a comment first and say that change is hard, and in this case, I think it's hard for me because Ellen has been clear this was commonplace in her previous district. When we discussed this at the meeting on November 21st, and the minutes in our packet tonight reflect this, there was a presentation, I think it's on page 113 in your packet, there was a proposal that we make an adjustment for personnel and expense lines, and we did that. But I did not, at that time, have the understanding it would become a recurring thing. And I think the example I gave was, I was concerned that, I think I used Grant Smith at VO as an example. If Grant sees he's going to overspend a line item at VO, is he going to go to another line item and draw that and sort of scale that budget back to make up for something? My concern was that we go back and we look at documents like this for planning purposes. How could we be sure when we went back and looked at a budget that, let's say Grant started with $5,000 for something, he scaled it back to $3,000 to offset an overspend somewhere? How might I know that he needed $3,000 or he needed $5,000? And the answer at the time was, well, we always have that original budget, which is totally true. So we vote a budget in January, and our practice has been, you got to get through town meeting to really know what you have. You will know finally about retirements, maternity leaves, right? We'll hire people, we'll make an offer. So it makes sense then in the fall when we kind of have a team to make this change, which for years we made at the last school committee meeting in October. And then that was sort of the budget. And perhaps because I've just been so accustomed to it, and because at the end of the day, we can't overspend our overall school budget. There were lines where we were over, and there were lines where we were going to have money left over. And I guess I always looked at that and I thought, well, so this is helpful then, because then when we talk about the next year's budget, I see where either did we make some wrong assumptions, were we too ambitious, or what have you. So I wonder if in doing this, I guess having said all that, my question might be, how frequent might these adjustments be? Because we did one on the 21st of November. And could someone sort of speak to what's the value of doing it if at the end of the day we're still working towards the same budget and it's taking Ellen's time and others' time to move numbers around when we can see we need to come off the gas on this item because we got to make up something here. I'm just trying to understand the value of the time to put into this exercise, because it is different, and as I started off, change is hard.
Change is hard.
So
So a couple of, and Alan, jump in. So the town hall was never comfortable with our previous practice, even though theoretically town meeting approves our bottom line budget. They were never comfortable with our practice of letting some lines go into deficit and never making that adjustment. Because that's not the way they do it on the town side. That's not best business practice. So on your report, the original appropriation is listed there, first column, and then you can see what the transfers are. So it's very clear where you've removed money or added money. What's less clear is in the personnel. So on the expense side, it's pretty clean. On the personnel side is where it gets a little rough. And I don't think we necessarily are going to make a lot of personnel adjustments here. The reason Ellen has been tracking personnel lines so closely is because we've had a budget shortfall because of special education in contractual services, in tuitions, and in transportation. And so I need to be confident that at the end of the year, we can meet all our bills. And so I've asked her to track every personnel change closely and reflect it in the appropriate budget place so we know where we can transfer personnel into expense to cover those shortfalls in special education. So for me, when you talked about what's the development process for new courses, it's the same for budget. So I look at the last 5 years, and you've seen John's sheets in the past that list what was the appropriation and what was the actual. What was the appropriation and the actual for the last 5 years? And often, when there's a request for an increase, I look back and say, well, he's never spent more than $3,000 in this line. But the problem is, because we never make any adjustments, I'm not sure that $3,000 was actually even spent on the thing that it was designated for. For example, I would like to be much tighter in tracking things like microscopes. So we buy a microscope at the middle school for the science department. It's not a lot of money. It's a couple of $100s. Does it come out of equipment? Does it come out of science department consumables, instructional materials, student materials? It's important which budget line you take that from, so that then you have a record. We've actually spent X on equipment versus consumables. And so Ellen and I are more aligned in terms of more tightly tracking budget expenditures, making sure things are in the right categories than we've been in the past. It is a time-consuming effort. Ellen has had to stay very, very close to the personnel changes, and every time we have someone on a leave of absence or we have a shift in someone takes a new job, we have to calculate what the savings are or what the deficit is a result of that, and make sure that we can meet our bottom line. And that's because we are very lean. Our budget is a very lean budget. It is no, there's not a lot of wiggle room here. There aren't a lot of where are we hiding the extra money kind of categories. And so,
Are there any?
Or any
I
of
was
them.
gonna say, or any.
a lot.
Try that.
So,
Some people think we have.
some people think we have, but I think this is a really important discussion because what I have tried to do in my work with the budget advisory group is be very transparent about our budget. Every category of spending, what are the cost drivers, and when, and I have pushed for level expense funding for all of the building levels for several years because we've been putting our money into personnel. We haven't been buying a lot of new textbooks. We haven't been spending money on materials. And our enrollment has been increasing. And so that's all really challenging in terms of budgeting. So for you and for me, Chris, I find it much easier to look at any line in this budget and see what the transfer is and say, oh, I guess we over budgeted for that line. We didn't need to spend in that line. And know it now as I'm doing the next budget planning. So how often will we do this? Quarterly?
Quarterly.
Quarterly.
Okay.
So the next one you'll see will probably be in March,
Okay.
thereabout. Does that make sense?
That's very helpful, because it's a substantial change from our historic practice.
I think it just increases our transparency with the town side and shows that we are very responsible. So every time we spend $100 more in a line than we expected, we identify the source of that funding. And if principals, and Cindy asked this question because she's very attuned to individual principal needs and making sure they ask for things. If individual principals need things and it's not in their budget, we try to identify another budget source or grant or some other way to bring the resources to them. Does that make?
Yeah.
It sounds familiar. My recollection is that when we do the budget, we have a view of what's gonna happen, but enrollment is moving, and then what happens at the summer in terms of where and how we're able to staff. So we've had historically things in the central office to cover those things, and then eventually they make it out to the buildings in which they were actually landed, whether it's the person, the change in steps and lanes, or it's the actual positions. That seems to be fine. And I think from the town's perspective, especially with the implementation of systems like Munis, the optics are off until you correct the initial comparative number, so you want to kind of get the optics occasionally back in line. And that certainly would help the comptroller who's being asked to speak for everything, although the education budget in some instances is just a large number over to the side. And but now the systems are quite robust, you can actually see some byline item comparisons to look at. I have a question about one line item.
I hope Ellen can answer it.
How are we doing on the long-term substitutes as well as any sort of leave-related expenses? That always seems to be something that you have some years where there's a great deal of
Right.
maternity, and
Right.
some years you don't. Are we okay in that area?
Right now, I have been working with Nancy Clark as well as with Laurie Kirby to identify all of the long-term subs. Nancy Clark and I have met and have gone through, and she's starting to do her projections. Annually, she would start in March. This year, she's going to start in February with a spreadsheet to identify all of the long-term subs from now until the end of the year and what the cost will be for the sub, as well as what the potential savings for salary would be, to make sure that we are in a good place.
So in general, we've had a lot of maternity leaves this year. And whether or not that's a net benefit on the personnel line or not depends on how long the person has been here and whether any of it is unpaid. And so it's a case-by-case basis. I'm sure, Jen, how would you estimate? A couple dozen maternity leaves in the district this year? Easily.
Yeah.
Maybe
Feels
3
like
dozen,
more,
seems
but-
like more, several at each
Probably
building.
just that.
Where we have not had is long-term illnesses, and so thankfully that's a huge benefit to us. But the long-term subs are all maternity or paternity. Paternity leaves are only a short leave, but the long-term maternity leaves.
I mean, the percent spent looks in line, but, you guys might have more insight into something that's coming up or whatever.
Right. And then following the operating budget is the report for the grants. Grants, I am pleased to inform you that the grant, the second one on the page 15, the early childhood grant was just finally approved last week, so your next report will show expenditure for that. I was pleased to get that email. The rest of the federal grants, the Title I, Title II, Title III, we are receiving our allocations from DESE in accordance with our spending. I've been meeting with Katie Malone, who oversees the Title I, as well as working with Dr. Ellen Emma about her grants, to make sure that we're spending and that we're in good order and that we have plans. We have spending plans for any remaining FY17 grants, to spend those down first before we really jump into the expenditures of the FY18s. And then on page 18 begins the breakdown of the school department revolving accounts. So we are on target with our revenue for when we look at the school tuition, which is our preschool. We are almost at the halfway mark for the school year, and we have brought in about half of the anticipated revenue. In terms of school transportation, our revenue to date is $366,000. We had anticipated taking in $365,000 in fees, so we have met that projection.
That's a good thing.
We
Question
still-
before you go through?
Remind me again, what are the expenses in the facilities rental?
Facility rental, it would be custodians to
Primarily
cover
custodians.
Charge directly overtime into a particular
Yes.
use?
Yes, and I believe actually there was recently a contract settlement for the custodians union on the town side that resulted in a reconciliation from this account that took even more funds for the retroactive payments for them. It's primarily that we sometimes use some of the funds for building repairs that could be attributed to rental or that would enhance the space for rental. So something in an auditorium.
And earlier in the year, and it was reflected in the November budget report, we did use some facility rental money to purchase the AEDs that were needed in the buildings to bring us
That would enhance
into
the
compliance. Okay.
I'm happy to make a motion.
Thank you.
With this, school committee approve the FY18 budget transfer request dated January 9th as presented at the table tonight.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen.
Can I add one thing about the grants? Disappointing this year is the first year that they're not funding the special ed improvement grant. So,
Used
that
for
was-
professional development.
Yeah, that was a really good professional development tap-in targeted for us for special ed in particular, so obviously.
How much did we get for that generally, 20 to 40, something
Yeah,
like that?
somewhere in that range.
And that's a federal.
Yes.
So,
We approved, we didn't make the sort of cut, or we? don't
no,
have
they're
enough?
not doing them at all
State
in
didn't get it.
Massachusetts, right? So it just, I mentioned that because A, it's disappointing, but B, it does impact our budget because some of the things we did under that are things we have to do. So,
That's what I was just gonna ask,
that will
what
have
was
to
under
come
that?
somewhere else,
From
yes.
somewhere
What
exactly.
kinds of things were under that?
So the biggest thing that fell under that grant was, in particular, teachers for their relicensure now have to have 2 specific areas of PDPs in addition to their content and pedagogy. They also need to have ELL and special ed as part of the requirement. So we did a lot of funding for bringing in
Workshops.
some special ed workshops and PD for people to get those PDPs. So.
This is regular ed teachers to get
Yes.
their licenses
Yes.
updated. They have to get.
Retail.
We didn't pay for the retail under that, but we do pay for now people, we would bring things in for them to have
Special ed.
pieces under it, exactly, so.
But a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of the courses Jen and Pam and co-teach qualify for special education PDPs, the differentiated instruction and some of the social emotional PD. But it's another hit to what we would have spent for teacher professional development.
Knowing Jen, you haven't given up looking to other sources, have you looked for anyone else that is able to provide money for grants?
So not particularly around special ed, but we have just set up a meeting to launch a new piece of expensive professional development to talk with WIFI about at their next board meeting, so.
About literacy? Yeah.
All right.
District calendar?
District calendar.
District calendar. Did you want to get your PowerPoint ready to, do you want to get, Frida, do you want to get his
Yeah.
PowerPoint ready to go?
Cool
So
thing.
for McCall. So as we look ahead to 18-19, we have a draft district calendar for your review. It's pretty similar to this year's calendar. The only unknown is if we were to change start and end times, that would influence the center section in terms of school times.
Okay.
But the first day of school happens for teachers the day after Labor Day. And then our youngest students start with 2 half-days. Everyone else has a full day starting on Wednesday, the Wednesday after Labor Day. You can see that there are a number of early release days, primarily for conferences, but 3 for professional development. With the advent of full-day kindergarten, we now can make some of those on Mondays and Fridays, which has greatly enhanced our flexibility. The only wrinkle, I heard today that the first day back for teachers is going to be a voting day. The state has moved the primary voting day to the day after Labor Day. So that's actually good for us because it doesn't interfere with kids, although no, there'll be voters in our buildings with teachers trying to get their classrooms ready for the first day of school. Not ideal, but we can work around it. So I'm looking for feedback, and I'd like a vote on this at the next meeting if possible. It puts our last day of school without snow days at June 17th. Obviously, my preference has been to start before Labor Day, but that's something we'll have to negotiate in the next contract to get a little more flexibility about that. And we'd also obviously like to have more professional development days in the contract, but again, that's a contract issue that we've got to negotiate and will cost.
And have you discussed this with the union?
Union? I sent it to Anna. There aren't any changes from this year, so there is a provision in the contract that the union should give us feedback. So if there's any feedback, I'll let you know before the next meeting.
Just want to be sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looks good, Judy.
Okay.
All right. So, as you know, Hall Middle School needs to be expanded to deal with enrollment growth. Town meeting voted funding for us to completely design and build phase 1. It needs to be a 2-phase project, and phase 1 is to convert some interior space that already exists into 3 classrooms, and it's in the library wing, and then to build a connector corridor off of the end of that over to the E-wing, which is one of the newer wings, which kind of encloses a courtyard and creates a usable space. We've been calling it a outdoor classroom in quotes. We wouldn't schedule a class to meet out there regularly, but it would be available to, as breakout space outdoors, weather permitting. And they also voted about $187,000 to do the schematic design, the more detailed design of phase 2, which we're looking to build in the next couple of years to be ready for the enrollment growth that is forecast in the master plan, which accounts for all of the building that's going on in town and the potential for a very large scale residential developments, maybe something under Chapter 40B. So phase 2, in the master plan, and that we've been talking about to town meeting and recently, consists of a 6 classroom addition, which originally was kind of envisioned off of the library wing. Addition to the cafeteria, because the cafeteria is undersized for the current population, and with more students will be even worse. A teacher workroom, which would be kind of a renovation or conversion of what's now used for storage, and years ago was a typing classroom. It's kind of on a lower level, not really suitable to be used as a classroom, but would be a good breakout space for teachers since they don't have any of that kind of space at all. They don't have a workroom or a lunchroom at all. And then lastly, a little area of locker rooms or team rooms for the athletics program because with added enrollment, you have more participation in sports. And right now, they're using kind of a storage area as kind of a makeshift team room, and that's in the E-wing. And we also are a little low on public restrooms for the Knowlton Stadium. So if Knowlton Stadium is being used, we're okay, but it would be a lot better if we had a few more public facilities, so we don't have to bring in, portable ones. So we wanted to put that into phase 2, and it's been explained to town meeting a few times, and the schematic design would put that into clearer focus so we could really go out and ask the town for funding to actually build it, and then get that completed in time for the students as they arrive. We're anticipating, in like 2021, 2022, definitely within 5 years. So I'm trying to vamp till ready.
That was excellent.
Chris has got a lot more detail on phase 2. We figure pretty much enough about phase 1. Phase 1 is being overseen by the EFPBC, and Flansburgh Architects is doing the construction drawings, and we're getting really down to the final details about air conditioning and sconces and things like that. So I think phase 1 is
We're in good shape with phase 1.
Getting close to ready to go.
For the planning for phase 1.
So this is our, the enrollment that I mentioned. This is what is projected that by 2022, there will be an additional 147 students at McCall. And that's why, in addition to the phase 1, we need more classrooms.
Susan, do we need to reappoint you to the ESPBC?
What's that?
I don't think it requires an annual or anything.
I was asking if we have to reappoint Susan to the EFPBC. I thought it was a 3-year term.
I will have to look. I don't know.
It might be important to do that.
Good point.
Okay.
So here's what I was mentioning. The schematic design cost for phase 2 is $187,305. That's been funded by town meeting. That's what we're using now. We have a working group that's working with Flansburgh to do the schematic design for the bigger phase, phase 2. Okay, and this is, phase 1 is in green. That is the area that has been being used as the youth center, and it can be converted into 3 classrooms, and that connector is also shown there, and the courtyard. So that's on track to get in the ground, and it's already in the ground, just to get in there and remodel. This is the level of detail that you need for actually building something. This is a construction drawing, right?
And so in other words, we just went from that
Yeah.
to that. That's 100% schematic design.
Oh,
that
okay.
town meeting gave us $50,000 for. And then from this level, now the EFPBC is working on mechanical, electrical, fire protection, right? All of the sort of the detailed cost estimates and so forth. So what we're doing now with phase 2 is we're taking the blue areas and we're going to take them to a similar level of detail. And that's the basis for a real cost estimate and a sense of project schedule. So phase 2 is slated, as Susan said, for 2020 completion, September of 2020. It is that 3-story classroom addition, which from the master plan was envisioned behind the library wing. It includes a retrofit of existing space at the lower level for a teacher workroom, specialist work area. We need to expand that cafeteria to account for our rising enrollment and meet the life safety code. And then also to address, with the rising enrollment, where there's pressure points everywhere in the district, and that includes that we're out of space to support our field athletics at Knowlton Stadium and Manchester Field. So we were proposing to take existing space at the lower level of the E-wing that's sort of an underutilized storage space. It's not really finished space, but it was available, and to turn those into team rooms. So that was the concept you all will be familiar with from the master plan, and town meeting gave us the 180 and change to take this to the next level. So So what's the process and timeline to do that? How are we going to spend that money? So similar to what we did for phase one, a working group has been established. There are about 13 work weeks from the time we got started, once the money was really available from town meeting. And we're going to spend those 13 weeks in 5 meetings to try to take what is kind of a conceptual level idea from the master plan and turn it into that more detailed schematic design set of drawings for the cost estimate. So I won't expect you to read all of this, but just to sort of make the point that 13 weeks goes by very quickly, but the meetings are spread out with specific sort of agendas and milestones to accomplish. I've highlighted 3 things here to call to your attention. On Monday, January 22nd, there will be, we've already had one presentation to the Board of Selectmen a couple of weeks ago to kind of outline the process. But on the 22nd, we're going to meet with the Board of Selectmen to present the concept as it exists by that date. We will have had 3 meetings under our belt, and we will be in a better position to have narrowed what the costs are. That date is important because if you look at the bottom, the Selectmen will need to vote on February 20th to place a debt exclusion override question on that spring ballot. So that's not a decision they make in March, even though the election is in March. So we have to kind of back these things up. It was requested that we give them an update on the 22nd, give them enough information that they can begin to have that discussion over the course of 2 or 3 meetings. And of course, we will continue to inform them after meetings 4 and 5. We look to have by the end of the second week of February an update on the estimate. So that's kind of our detailed work plan. So what's new for the school committee from the last time we really talked was option 1A conceptually is just as it was in the master plan. It's got these, I'll use my laser pointer here. So it's got these sort of simple 4 discrete parts. You've got the addition, you've got the teacher workspace, you've got the cafeteria, and you have the athletic space. The construction cost range is similar to what it was in the master plan, and of course a higher project cost. We should be clear what's the difference. So construction cost is literally what a contractor would charge you for the labor and materials to build something. But that doesn't include architect and engineering fees. It doesn't include things like hazardous material investigation and abatement. It doesn't include an owner's project manager if we were going to go with that sort of delivery. And the biggest element it doesn't include are all the contingencies. So, if you're going to hack into an old building for which you have limited documents, you like to carry a very conservative contingency, maybe 20%, to avoid those, to help pay for those unexpected discoveries. So that's not quite what we're working with here, but we still definitely need a healthy construction contingency. There are also owner's contingencies and design contingencies, and this is something that, Judy and Susan and the EFPBC are in the midst of discussing right now with Town Hall. So that's one of the reasons why you see some ranges for project cost and why the range, frankly, is what it is. Option 1B is very similar. The key difference here is what we've done with the library. So in 1A, the very simple idea was the library would be sort of left alone as it is. These are the stacks area you may be familiar with when you enter the main level of McCall. You make a sharp right U-turn, we got some stacks, and this is that kind of beautiful vaulted ceiling area. The concept here simply is we have 3-story classroom addition, and so to get to the spaces on the 3rd floor, students and staff are going to have to move right through the library. So obviously there was some concern about that, but that's kind of the cheaper down and dirty way to do it, and get the space quickly. Option 1B says, let's try to minimize the impact on the library. So we sort of take that program and we push it, if you will, out to that new addition. And then where the stacks are, we kind of backfill with a classroom. So it takes the program and it pushes it out. But importantly, it fails to do a couple of things. We've heard from the community a real interest in sort of the nature of that space, that kind of double height vaulted ceiling. That's special to many people in the community, but also we've heard that the exterior of that library wing is one, and I'll just race to the beginning of this very quickly. A lot of care and feeding went into, I think it was a 1996 edition right here. A lot of effort was made to make that wing kind of look like it belongs there, and it really does fit well with the architectural context. So options 1A and 1B never really included taking that level of detail, if you will, and replicating it. So that would add substantial cost as well. So then bearing that in mind, then the question was, is there another solution here beyond 1A and 1B? And that's option 2. which is in fact the third and preferred option. Option 2 is, first of all, it's a simpler approach. It has just 2 to 3 discrete parts, and what we're doing here is we're taking this 3-story, 6 classroom addition, and actually pulling it over here and sort of extending the E-wing. Interestingly about this is it's kind of co-located with the expansion that we're looking to do for the cafeteria. The retrofitted team rooms are not highlighted here because in this scenario, that space program could be accommodated at that same lower level behind the stands today, but it could be located down here in the lower level. In other words, we'd have to go in and do the excavation here anyway to build the structure, a la the 3 classrooms at VO that were there as shell space when we built the building, and then we went and we fitted them up. So it's sort of a similar arrangement. So the construction cost is sort of in the ballpark of what was in the master plan. It's a little more than 1A, it's less than 1B, and we're looking at a project cost of under $10 million. To just give you a teaser about what that looks like at a different level of detail, I'm showing you the cafeteria level, the lower level here as you come down the hallway. So you see the cafeteria expansion then is adjacent to what is ultimately just sort of an extension of the organizing egress corridor that is the E-wing. And so Flansburgh has proposed maybe a reverse curve, some sort of architectural design element to play off the curve we have of the E-wing today. I only wanted to show this one floor plan because, you know, what we really are sort of drawn to is this idea of moving the space program from the back of the library wing, moving it over here. This should not be taken literally as sort of a design element. This is just so early in the process. So what the working group was really drawn to was, makes a lot of sense to do this. Remember, this is going to be a phased occupied project. Just like the high school, not as large, not as expensive, not as lengthy, but we envision construction beginning in 2019, a lot of excavation, utility relocation, possibly some structure in the summer of 19, and that there would be work going on in this building in the fall, in the winter of 19, during the school year. So anything we can do to kind of minimize the disturbance seems to be a plus. And in this instance, then it means this is no longer a construction zone. And you'll all be familiar, this happens to be right here. I'm sort of showing where the bus pickup is. So there's another advantage to kind of pull that construction activity back. And we can still kind of maintain a courtyard space here. This is actually the storage space today that would become that teacher and workroom component. Lots of natural lighting in here from some original windows, so that is still maintained. It could still be, frankly, a wonderful space. To show you what that might look like, sort of bird's eye view, again, this is really more of a massing model, not to be taken literally, but you get a sense here with the massing of the gymnasium wing. You've got the library wing, here you have the E-wing, and then this option 2 kind of suggests how that space program might infill the site. And then I couldn't resist, when I realized Flansburgh had done some modeling, it mirrors almost exactly the perspective here that we've kind of become familiar with of the library wing. So again, you kind of get a sense with the library wing, you've got that curving facade of the E-wing, which comparatively speaking has very little detail to it. You know, this was always kind of imagined to be sort of the feature, if you will, of the back of the school. And so this is not to be taken literally in terms of what the color would be. So I should just say that. It's just simply called out as a massing element. So what the material is it brick? Is it something else? And if it's brick, does it contrast with the E-wing? Does it try to match the E-wing? By the way, any architect will tell you you'll never match brick. So those are all discussions that Flansburgh will have with the working group and with the EFPBC. So to close, we've got a detailed work plan, and we're doing a lot of work very quickly that hopefully gets us to this place, which is, you see the dollar sign is the debt exclusion override. We're working hard here with schematic design. We hope we have the support of the Board of Selectmen in February, and with the support of the public in the spring, which would then be followed by spring town meeting. So remember, there's really 2 yes votes we're looking for. We'll have the ballot question, and then there will be action on the part of spring town meeting. Then we would get started on the construction documents for phase 2, just like we're doing right now for phase 1. And the urgency, and there are sometimes questions like, why do we have to do it now? Why should we go out with a ballot question, for instance, before spring town meeting? is that our architects have looked very carefully at this. The scope of the project is such that to get that early package out, excavation, utility relocation, foundations, we need to get moving just ASAP on the construction documents so that we can get them out to bid, get contractors on board, and get shovels in the ground the first day of summer. Any questions?
Do you know of any ballot override committee that's been formed?
So we had some discussion about, actually, you want to say a word about the PISC meeting
Yep,
last
we
night?
talked to the Parents Inter-School Council folks. I've talked to a couple other people just individually, and how this sounds like it's a long way off, but it's really not, because, you know, we don't have a sort of one page with a design on it, but March is fast approaching. So it's in the process of coalescing.
It's a very short runway, as Ms. Connolly put it last night.
It is.
But, you know, there's sort of
Extremely
there's two runways here. It's still too it's almost too early to go out with much of an articulated message beyond, obviously, we can talk about the space need, and we can talk about the kinds of solutions, but we just don't have a plan yet. So I feel like every couple of weeks, we're in a better and better position to really be able to say what it is, you know?
The alternative will be if
Yep.
it's not successful.
Yeah.
And historically, this kind of thing can only pass if there is some kind of a campaign.
We are on social media. For anybody on Twitter, the hashtag is McCall Expansion Project, and I'm pleased that some residents are already chatting about that and sharing information. So
Already posted some
Judy's
stuff.
included. So and I'm not a Facebook guy, I'm a Twitter guy, but Judy's all over Facebook. So, you know, as this project sort of evolves and we have information that's sort of suitable for, you know, the public to sort of see and understand, we put it out there, and we'll do that with this as well.
I would remind people that we have a page on our website.
Yep.
There's a button you can click on the front page of the website. That's the McCall Expansion Project, if you want to know more about it.
So the new preferred option, phase 2, Chris, does that give us the same amount of cafeteria
Yes.
expansion and the same square
Yes.
footage of classroom space that the other options do?
It does, and although interestingly, this actually affords us an opportunity I didn't mention, which is at that lower level. So imagine here this is the classroom level, but at the lowest level, which opens directly onto the stands there at Knowlton Stadium, this is where we propose to put the team rooms, the bathrooms. So I think this committee is aware that we only provide for the public at major sporting events. We've got just the single stall bathrooms with the out-swinging doors over here at that lower level behind the gym. For big games like the Thanksgiving Day game, Mark Aria or someone will bring in, you know, portable toilets and so forth. We would love to be able to provide better and more facilities for the public, given the amenity that is Manchester Field. This presents an option to do that, not necessarily to provide all the toilets we would need by code. We have a waiver today. That's why we're allowed to kind of operate the way we do. There is a potential that we could provide, you know, 3 or 4 toilets for men and women here, and which would not only sort of be a good thing to do, but one might say, gee, over the long haul, you're going to avoid the hassle of bringing in those trucks for all these major events. So, Michelle, that's just a bonus, sort of unrelated to the master plan. I would say, you know, this space that you're seeing is equivalent to, if not just a little bit greater than what we had in the master plan. And there is space, for instance, here to accommodate enrollment growth beyond 2027. That's important as well. And also remind the committee that between phase 1 and phase 2, we're getting 1 extra classroom. In case that enrollment, let's say, is at the high end of the Donahue Institute projection.
Well, our programs expand.
Or program, yes. Always forget to say that.
I was just
should do that.
wondering why they didn't bring the cafeteria all the way out to the edge of that.
So the field also goes right there.
Yes.
Yep.
The corner of the field is right there.
Well,
I
there's that little round thing that, you know.
I mean, that will
roundabout?
go basically
Are
up
you
to
talking
the.
about?
Yeah, there's a lower level plan that shows the relationship of some of those things, and they're looking at that. Yeah.
Yep, yeah, they're looking at that.
So I think the working group is very excited by option 2.
Yes.
Yeah, it seems clever to kind of bring everything together and stack it rather than to put it in different
So this is a
Also different
four-story addition.
Good point.
Right, when you include that lowest level, that's right. Yeah.
Well, and the original had the connector to the
We still
other
have a
part of the
connector.
Still
building.
have
Is
the
that
connector.
still there?
Connectors on the
Still
other
have the connector, actually it shows up right here.
Yeah.
So this, for
The
instance,
roundabout,
Michelle,
yeah.
this
No, I meant-
presumes phase one is done. There's the connector.
the
So
Right.
this, what is now gray, that's all phase one.
Right.
What we're saying here, this is where the
You're right.
expansion would be for two.
You're so right.
Yeah, the driveway goes in front of the gym.
Okay.
Yep.
You're right.
It's behind the stands. This is really
Well,
behind the
this has a
stands.
little corner of the field, very close, you're right.
Do we still need that connector?
What's that?
Do we still need
Yeah.
that? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we will make
For
a glass
accessibility.
facade.
We'll get a field goal and a library book.
Yep.
All right, you can see in that, Cindy, how close to the field.
Yeah, you can see how close it is. Yeah, good point.
Ish.
Shall we proceed with
We shall.
the next fun item, which is,
Thanks, Chris.
the select board has been kind of struggling with the traffic situation near Vincent Owen, the fairly recently rebuilt Vincent Owen School. Remind me what that intersection is. It's Johnson Road and
Ridge?
Ridge and Johnson Road. And they're trying to be proactive and protect public safety and come up with some sort of policy at their table because they have the inherent authority over traffic regulation and roads, to be sure that traffic impacts are studied when we do major school renovations or rebuilding projects. And of course, safety is of paramount concern. And I believe that, if my memory serves, there were some discussions about, do we need to look at that intersection when we were designing and funding Vincent Owen.
Yep.
But something happened in the process and it didn't get addressed, and they don't, want to be sure that that doesn't happen again. So they've been talking about this kind of a policy, and this is a very preliminary draft, and they're, looking for our input, how we would feel about that. And Mike Betancourt has said that there's no huge rush, and he wants to hear what we think. I think it started out as a short couple of sentences, and then people have added to it and added to it. And I'm just going to put it out there that my initial reaction is that it's way too broad for what they want to do. I mean, I understand wanting to protect public safety and to be sure that there's funding to do that, but I worry that this is going to impair our ability to do a lot of things, or just add cost in a way that won't really address any problems, So, I'm not sure how, what the process is for negotiating this with the Board of Selectmen, but they're open to our input. And I think Chris has some, right? Is that true? They are
Shall the
open to our
curmudgeon
input?
go first? I appreciate the introduction because I think it's very well intentioned, but
Yes.
it is, I would consider it sort of, in a way, an unfunded, burdensome mandate, because you're gonna hire a consultant, so now you gotta pay for it, so now you're adding to the cost of the project, and then to your point, what comes out of the traffic study itself? I think there's language in here to the words themselves. I agree. I think it's overly broad. There's some subjective language. I think they added the word major. Let's see. So I think an earlier version may have said school renovations and/or rebuilding projects. They added major. A concern I had a few weeks ago was, we spent over $1 million on the roof at Lynch. That's a major project that required architecture and engineering, but I wouldn't suggest that it impacts traffic. We spent a lot of money on the McCall ceiling. Same thing. I think language like nearby intersections. What is nearby? Is that immediately adjacent? Is that a neighborhood? I think they've added some language in here about the holistic approach. Yes, so the study should look holistically at safe routes. What's interesting is, so the Board of Selectmen, and Michelle may not be aware of this because this goes back a little bit, but the Board of Selectmen actually on their own took an initiative back in 2011, the school safety study. They hired a traffic consultant at FST. They looked at all of our school sites, all 7. One of the outcomes was our flashing lights, but there were many recommendations that came out that were not implemented because we didn't have the money. So to me, the issue, there may be a perception that when we are really focused on a major school capital project, we are maybe so focused on the building and not kind of the bigger picture, the context. And I can appreciate how some may feel that way. I think, and I would invite Cindy to chime in on this too, I think our history shows that maybe that's really not the case. So with VO, with Johnson and Ridge, I remember those EFPBC meetings where we were proactively trying to figure out what we could do. We actually brought in a traffic engineer. I heard Cindy loud and clear, this is an MSBA project. They will not participate for the same reason you can't build a pool at Winchester High School if it's MSBA funded. So it wasn't for a lack of trying. I would remind the committee that when we established the subcommittee to look at the carriage house about 4 years ago, we not only looked at the building, we looked at vehicular traffic on the site. We went so far as to recommend a curb cut off High Street, and that in fact found its way into the master plan. And when we wrote the RFP for the master plan, we included recommendations around traffic. So whatever a new Morocco may become, or a new Lynch, if we look at the master plan, it's much more than just a footprint. So you all may remember Flansburgh has looked at some options that bring vehicles from one side of the site across the site, which today we don't do. So there's just been, I think, a lot of genuine interest and inquiry around pedestrian and vehicular traffic on a lot of our major projects. I don't think we're, blind to it. But I think maybe my overarching sort of reality in my mind is I'm just not convinced that the major capital projects are even the trigger. So as I said to Susan the other day, if McCall Phase 1 and Phase 2 never happen, we still have more kids. So we have more cars. And we have more pedestrians. So what's really driving traffic, what's driving congestion, is enrollment growth, it's population growth. It's not sort of like we're building a 16-screen movie theater on Washington Street, and that's going to sort of bring them, right? I think our projects sort of respond to the growth of the community.
Can I ask whether there's a similar requirement for other residential building projects or commercial building projects in town?
I think the Bolton Street project would be worthy of a traffic study that would be funded by the developer. And I think those things are kind of in kind as opposed to a sort of a tax.
So it's a negotiated.
Yeah. I
So
think they did water and sewer up in other developments, bringing a line in.
When Winchester Hospital purchased the 620 Washington Street property, town meeting approved an SCI sort of rezoning to permit that healthcare use, and associated with the rezoning, which came before the actual construction, there were quite a bit of work around traffic studies, evaluation of current and projected impact. I don't think that was required, by charter. I think that was just common sense, and I think that was a good example of town hall kind of functioning the way it should, which was, this is a major change of use, major project, going to bring a lot of patients, a lot of staff. We need to evaluate this, and so they did.
So without passing a specific policy, a board policy, the select board has the capacity to require or suggest or fund traffic studies at any time.
Correct.
So I'm not sure, so the only difference, it seems to me then, between this and that already inherent capacity is that they want to fund it through the school department building project funding. Budget.
And what kind of money are we
MSBA
looking
would
at?
restrict us from being able to do.
I think it's very
Right.
I think it's very significant money, so that I met with the town engineer and the town manager around potential traffic study related to the proposed change in school start times. And we talked a lot about all the variables and factors. just a simple study that doesn't, won't result in new signals or other major improvements, is somewhere in the range of $10,000. So this could add significant costs to each building project that we embark on, whether we need it or not. It seems to me that we have a reasonable working relationship, and if we build a new building in a different place or change the configuration, the traffic study would necessarily be part of that. It's in our interest to have more kids walk to school and to identify safe routes for walking and so forth. So I think we've already got this capacity. I'm not sure we need an additional sort of mandate to do it.
So there's also a energy management policy for new buildings that we put together 9 years ago, 10 years ago. I drafted it. That was basically, it was intended to do the same thing, which is whenever there's major projects, our hope is that it will meet X, Y, and Z. And I think that that's what they're trying to do here, is say, anytime that there's a major project that's going on, the town should also consider making sure that we have resources available to do X, Y, and Z. MSBA won't pay for it. It can't be part of the budgets for said services. But the town should look to retain a traffic engineer to complete a traffic study. I mean, I think if you just said that first paragraph, that first sentence, you get to what they're trying to do.
Yep.
Which is an intentional one, not a policy requirement.
And in terms of outcomes, I would hope that the way it's written right now, the results go to the EFPBC. The EFPBC manages many, but not all of our school projects. But right now, the results don't even go to the school committee or superintendent. So
There's no voice.
There's no voice.
There's not even a school
Yeah.
person on any of the committee.
Well, and there's some implications here in terms of safe routes and encouraging pedestrians and bike activities that we haven't had those conversations about.
Right.
And so I don't think that's something that the Board of Selectmen would weigh in on. And I'm not sure that they would have the expertise either without an engineering study to speak about things like cutouts for buses versus circles versus.
Right.
So I think that a statement of purpose and intention might be a better approach, but I appreciate what they're trying to say, and had we been able to have the town pay for a traffic study when we did VO, I think we all would have been pretty happy to see the results of that.
Right. So maybe what do we do? Should we try to get on their agenda? Talk to them? Write them a letter?
I make a motion, you have coffee with Mr. Bettengord.
A second.
I think
Oh,
that
second,
would be
now we gotta
step
vote.
one.
I heard a second.
Hey, that happens anyway. And maybe you could, you talk to
Informal
the
feedback.
town
Yeah, I'll talk to the
manager?
town manager. I mean, I think we all want the same outcome,
We do,
which is
we
good
do.
planning.
Sure.
I'm not sure even legally they have the right to mandate that the school department spend money on anything. So, that aside, I just think we can accomplish the same aim in a different way without tying anyone's hands.
Maybe Mr. Nixon and I can draft something using this language that seems more straightforward. I'm happy to take a first crack at it, and I'll send it to you, and maybe you can cut it, and then at least that will give them something tangible that.
Yes,
That's great.
that'd be very
Excellent.
helpful, thank you.
Which will probably be much briefer.
That's fine.
Before
Unless
March.
Mr. Nixon runs with it.
Well played.
Good luck with that.
Something that just occurred to
Yes.
me is, so in the middle school project, are they looking at the parking?
Yeah.
So the,
Seems to me there's gonna be some increase in teachers when there's classrooms.
whether or not there are classrooms, we'll still have more teachers as our enrollment goes up. We have not, there's been no discussion of expanding the existing parking or changing the existing parking at the rear of the building.
Discussion or not, it has expanded, they're using the dirt.
It has what?
They're using the dirt.
They're using the dirt.
when it's
So,
accessible.
Yeah.
so that's probably a capital question.
But can I just suggest, so that's, so the master plan doesn't show specific sort of parking or traffic concepts, though we talk about them at the master plan level. It's in schematic design where you sort of begin to peel it all back and say, what do we need to do to make this work? So with respect to phase one, we're not doing anything with traffic and parking. But it is a totally legitimate question for phase two that Flansburgh may already be working on. What I can tell you is that when we looked at phase 2, there was another scenario back when we still weren't sure where we were going with enrollment projections. There was another scenario building something off the back of the gym wing, a 12 classroom addition, a lot more money. Ultimately, we chose, we realized we didn't need it. That drove a lot of conversation. In other words, the old analogy about a little pot of water and it's warmed, does it go boiling immediately or sort of increase the temp over time? So the feeling was with phase 1, don't need to do anything in traffic and parking. With the phase 2 that we have now, probably not, but in one scenario, definitely we did. So I guess that's what I would say is,
So, let me look at it.
we looked at it, we studied it, maybe Flansburgh is looking at that now associated with option 2.
I'm told with self-driving cars, we won't need so much parking.
Yeah.
Very soon.
Okay.
I saw a slide that said
Hopefully the
2022.
Florida
so-
drives.
We won't need any parking by then.
We'll just build a beam into the school.
Yeah.
What are we on, approval of gifts,
Okay,
Whole Foods?
so approval of gifts, Whole Foods, yes.
So these are a series of 4 donations. The first one is from Whole Foods in the amount of $200 to be used for the high school culinary arts program.
Very nice of them.
Yeah, sorry, I can't get there fast enough. What page?
I can do it.
Page 73.
Who's there?
I make a motion to vote to accept with gratitude a gift of $200 from Whole Foods of Woburn to be used for the high school culinary arts program.
Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you, Whole Foods. The next gift is from an annual gift from Looters in the amount of $150 to be used in any way the school department deems appropriate, always for the benefit of students. And we thank them very much for their generosity.
You're on the train.
Okay, I vote to accept with gratitude the contribution of $150 from Looters Environmental Incorporated.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The next is the CASIT grant, which you have already approved,
John and Mary Murphy.
which is lovely. Then the last one is John and Mary Murphy Foundation. They had given us a grant for musical instruments. The amount that you approved last time was slightly less than the final grant amount, which was $501 more.
Oh.
So we just need to accept that.
I vote to accept with gratitude a gift from the John and Mary Murphy Foundation in the amount of $501 for musical instruments as presented.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so as you might have noticed, we've had a number of executive sessions to talk about the
Superintendent's
successor agreement with our superintendent, Judy Evans. And it was very carefully thought out and talked about. And I'm very pleased to say that we've negotiated a contract, and that in general, that contract would have a base term of 4 years. It would then have 2 options exercisable by the committee for 2 one-year extensions. So it could be as long as the statutory maximum of 6 years for stability. It has a 2.5% salary increase from the existing salary for the next contract year, which would be next budget year. It also provides for resignation by the superintendent upon 180 days' notice to us, includes a bereavement leave, and also includes an early termination by the committee upon 120 days' notice with a lump sum severance payment not to exceed $100,000. When we went out to look for a new superintendent, we were looking for someone with, we were looking for a proven district leader with, who would bring fresh eyes and expertise to the district, and I think Judy has definitely done that. She's exceeded our expectations. She's a curriculum leader who is visible, visits the schools and classrooms regularly. She takes a collaborative and fact-based approach to decision-making. And she is an innovator with courage to challenge assumptions and have difficult conversations, who I think, as we saw tonight, inspires people to embrace change and emboldens them. And I think that she's embarked on many important long-range improvements, and we need to keep her here. So I'm happy that we've hammered out an agreement to keep her here for another substantial period of time.
Thank you so much for those kind words.
Thank you for all your time, Susan, working with Judy
Oh,
on
you're
this. I'm happy to move to authorize you as chair on behalf of the school committee to enter into a new superintendent contract with Judith Evans for a base term of 4 years, with 2 options exercisable by the committee for 2 one-year extensions, and having other terms authorized in executive session or carried over from the initial contract, including 2.5% salary increase from the existing salary for the 2018-19 initial year, resignation by the superintendent upon 180 days' notice, bereavement leave, and early termination by the committee upon 120 days' notice, and lump sum severance payment not to exceed $100,000.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Oh, thank you.
I tried to figure out how to have balloons come down from the ceiling. Couldn't figure it out.
So instead, we just had water come in.
That was
Lovely, let me tell you.
We had water come in from outside, yeah.
No, that's great.
And I have the contracts here if we want to sign them afterwards.
Sounds good. Thank you.
It's a plan.
That's the plan.
So then we have the Mystic School property where that we've been talking about leasing it out again. Part of it is occupied by the rec department, part of it is presently occupied by Kids Corner. Their lease is up and it's time to negotiate a new lease. And we're told by the town and town manager who's gonna work on the RFP and that whole process, that the first step is for the school committee to make just a simple declaration that this property is not being used right now, and their council drafted this declaration and sent it over, and basically what it says is that the Winchester School Committee, being in charge of the Mystic School and that area that's not occupied by the rec department, is quote-unquote not in actual use or currently required for municipal or school purposes and is suitable for lease by other parties.
Is there a time frame? Meaning for the next RFP?
The statute says the maximum can be 10 years, max. I was there was a conference call with the town council today, and he assured us that this is not an authorization to do anything in particular, that the RFP would contain more specific things like the length of the lease. And
The length of the lease is dictated by the RFP, the details,
Right.
the cost.
So
They're not signing a 10-year lease, in other words?
So, actually, we sign the lease?
We have to approve the lease.
Right.
And also
Even
we
though the
approve the lease.
manager probably signs it. It's subject to our approval.
So the town, we asked that question today, who signs the lease? And it's actually, he suggests the superintendent and the town manager sign. Whether it's a 5-year lease or a 10-year lease, there's a clause that we're insisting on within the RFP and the lease that says that with 6 months' notice, the property becomes ours again, that the tenant is required to leave. There has to be some provision for real property that improvements and so forth that happen during the term of the lease, if we were to need the space.
Do we have to compensate for repairs they make?
If that's written into the lease, yes. So if they make major capital improvements, like they put in an elevator, and we terminate it early, usually over the, there's some compensation with either reduced rent, or some other provision. So the actual physical details of how that all works out will be ironed out later. This just allows us to advertise with a request for proposal.
And if they decide that they want to put an elevator in there, they don't need our approval in order to do that, because they have a lease. They own the lease. They can do whatever they want with the building.
Well,
I think they need our approval.
Yeah, if
We
they
still
would-
own the
I don't
building.
think we
Yeah,
would
just
put
like
that in
they
the lease.
needed our approval to do the artificial turf.
No, I understand the past lease. I'm
Yeah,
just asking, moving
Yeah, we
forward.
would
to-
put that into the RFP, so
Just
that,
so
yeah.
that we don't get into a situation where they're investing money that we can't reimburse them for, and therefore we won't be able to pull out of the lease.
But to Cindy's point about the 10 years, even though there would be break language, a break clause, it's still fair to say there's a public perception around a 10-year lease that's different than a public perception around a 5-year lease.
Right, and it's possible to do a 5-year lease and then renew it.
Yeah.
So that would be my recommendation, is to go for a shorter time period, but. Are you comfortable with this?
I am just thinking to myself, I think that the tenant would be under all the sort of responsibilities of any town building in terms of who they could hire to do contracting, what types of bidding process, et cetera, but I don't know that to be true.
I don't know that either, but.
So all of the, I think in the lease, you set the conditions for things like utilities, repairs, whose responsibility it is, and the DPW is, and I have witnessed this myself, they are very strict about any outside contractors coming on, making sure they have insurance and so forth. And they kick them right off site if they don't. So they're pretty good. So I think that we'll.
Yeah, I think Town Hall will draft a good RFP and,
Right.
you know,
And then
they
the
said
lease-
Judy's gonna be involved in
And I'll be
looking at
involved.
it.
The lease is really going to be somewhat tailored to whether the existing leaseholder renews or if a different party comes forward, the terms of the lease.
Right. By law, we have to do an arm's length RFP, so that's what we're doing.
Right.
But we, meaning you, will have input into what the RFP looks like, though. That's not gonna be drafted solely by Town Hall.
Right.
So do you need us to sign them?
Yes, so we need to have we need to vote.
I move to approve the excess of the Mystic property in preparation for lease as presented this evening.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So are you sending around a signed copy, Cindy?
Yeah, I was just
And then I'll-
erasing my little.
Oh, I've got a clean one.
I
if
have
you
a
want
clean
some.
one right here.
All right, let's send it around.
I have it.
Perfect.
Yeah, we'll just.
Thank you.
All right,
I'll
I got
sending
it.
it that way.
Policies.
Okay, so.
Can we take
The
these
ninth.
as a consent?
That's it, we should have more than one.
Yeah, we should do,
More than one signed copy.
yeah, that wouldn't be bad.
We keep one?
We
You want
don't-
to keep one?
We don't usually do consent agendas. The Board of Selectmen does. I think it'd be a great thing to start doing for all these policies, but
How does the policy subcommittee feel about taking these as a group, since we've already had a first reading? There's only one that has a minor adjustment as a result of the first reading. The change is indicated in italics.
Yeah.
So if you took them as a consent, as a group?
Sorry. That was fine.
By me.
That sounds perfect.
They say fine.
oh, good. Okay. So
So there's a recommended vote that actually lists all of them on
there is
page
a vote in the book.
82.
I'll send that back to Susan.
Thanks.
So these have come before the school committee previously. Happy to make a motion that the committee approve policies ACE, ADC, BBA, BBBA / BBBB, BDD, BDF, DEDA. I had a book when I was, I just had a flashback being 4 years old and reading the book CDB. Remember that? My mom's not watching tonight from Texas. Anyway, BEDB, BEDH, and BIA as presented.
Right.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, great. Thank you for all your work on all these policies.
You're most welcome.
Believe me, I know what you're. So.
You could do these as a consent too.
Yes,
Yes,
and do the
we
agendas
had
as a group as well.
Several minutes, and I think we've seen a couple of these before.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I want to mention to Frida, one of these has some additional material, and that's in italics. When we approve the final thing, those italics will go away, and everything
Correct.
will look normal, right?
Just
Okay.
shows the change.
Yeah,
That's just a show.
see the change.
Okay.
So may I just, to dispatch some of this, may I make
Yeah.
a motion, we approve the regular session minutes of November 7th and November 21st as presented?
Mhm.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And then, anything you want to share about the executive session minutes with us tonight?
No.
Okay.
Can we do them as a group, or do you have a question?
I already got rid of two of them, somebody else is making a motion on these, not me.
I move that we approve the executive session minutes of July 10th, October 10th, November 7th, and December 5th as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Private, still,
Not released yet.
not released.
You have to separate vote for release.
So
What I
I'll
was
try to
looking
be
for,
really
so
brief.
Thank you.
I just, as a report, I was gonna suggest that, and just as something to think about, that we're at a juncture now with our capital projects where McCall is a smaller project and coming into fruition. We're planning it. We're finishing up the high school. It might be a good time for a new person to be the school committee representative on the EFPBC. I'm thinking about it.
Good.
And I think the process to do that was we kind of put out a announcement and see who's interested. I think it'd be a great time to get somebody, a parent with some, a little bit newer to the district involved. Of course, it takes a certain kind of expertise and interest level to be on the EFPBC. But it would be great to get a new person sort of up to speed before we maybe have to do a new elementary school or do anything, really major.
It'd be great to get the names of the people who applied before,
Oh, yeah.
And Susan, can you just mention what some of those qualifications might be that would be
Yeah, I
helpful on EFPBC?
I mean, it's kind of a permanent building committee. So someone with a construction background or project manager background.
although this person
And,
represents the schooling, so someone with an understanding of the school piece.
and the school program and what schools need, yes.
So, Ellen and I attend each meeting.
Yep, that's true.
And it is helpful to have a parent perspective.
Mhm.
There are electricians and architects galore on the committee, which is really helpful when it comes down to making some of the decisions that are very concrete. But there's also a representative from the Energy Committee. He's very helpful.
Mhm.
So it's nice to have a diversity. If you are comfortable with it, maybe Susan and I can draft a notice to go to parents and say, what we're looking for in terms of interest and what the process will be for selecting the person and appointing and what the time commitment is.
I might just suggest that we do what we did last time, which is if we post it publicly, then you could then separately direct through Messenger or what have you, folks to the posting.
Right, post it on the website, you mean?
Because I think we had this discussion before about do we sort of target an element of town, and I
Oh.
think it was recommended we not, that we, it's a
Yeah.
public body,
So maybe-
Right.
post it,
Maybe work
but
with
then you
Mary
can
Ellen.
simply say, hey, parents, if you're interested, this is something you may want to pursue.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to mention is just a little bit of background on next Tuesday. We're all set to have a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, or Select Board, because Swim Winchester has approached both the school committee and the board, because they've gotten to a certain point with their site investigation at Skilling's, and they just want some kind of more definitive feedback from us about whether we still think, Skilling's is a suitable place for a pool. And I know the first time they came to the school committee, I think it was, Michael was still on the committee, and we were fine, it would be right near the high school. Town has wanted to have a pool for a long time. There would be a great home pool for the high school students. And, we just, weren't quite there yet with the high school project or the flood mitigation work, but, So it just seems to make sense now to move forward and go ahead and have both boards meet at the same time. Swim Winchester would make a presentation, and there's a group of abutters who would probably make a presentation as well. And they're just looking for some kind of expression from us, one way or the other. So that's on the 19th, starting at 7:30. I think the board is going to convene at 7 and do some of their business, and then
Over there.
over at Town Hall, yes.
The 16th?
The 19th, I'm sorry. The 19th?
It's a week from today, isn't it?
I'm looking, it's the 16th. I'm looking at FY 19.
16th.
Yeah, it's the 16th.
January
Yep.
16th.
January 16th.
At 7 PM?
7:30 for us.
I regret I will be out of town that night. I'll be there in spirit.
Just remind
If you know
the
where I
Monday-
were going, you would be sad.
Monday
Yeah.
before our school committee meeting on the 23rd is the meeting with the Board of Selectmen around
Right.
McCall, if folks wanted to, be in attendance or.
The 22nd.
So that's the
22nd.
next update to the Board of Selectmen on.
That's, yes, so that's where we'd be presenting
Phase
the
two.
recommendation for phase 2, the cost range, and then fielding questions from them.
So much going on.
And that's 7:32 as well, Chris?
There's not that agenda hasn't been baked
I don't
yet,
think
so
that's
I don't know
okay.
what time.
What day is that?
Monday?
That's a Monday.
Monday night, the 22nd.
Oh, the 22nd.
Yep.
So the 16th and the 22nd.
Monday's a holiday. Well, everyone has their calendars. Can I do one more thing? So there is a group that is growing, that is, has been birthed into.
It's so late, I know, 10:20.
I really can't speak at the sound. The Winchester Youth Alliance.
Okay.
Best way I can explain them is they're essentially a chamber of commerce for youth serving organizations in town, both for-profit and not-for-profit. And they started to come together last spring, in large part around whether or not we should have a youth center, but now they've become sort of more around communications and like creating a directory and leveraging the voice of students, and so that we can all serve our youth, predominantly teens, better. And so they are hosting a youth forum on January 22nd at 6:30 at the library, and it is intended for middle school and high school students to come and provide their insights and ideas for how businesses and nonprofits in the community can better serve the needs of our youth. So it's basically everyone other than the schools, although Connect and Commit is the school liaison for this group. I suggested that they at some point come and just give us a heads up as to who they are and what they're hoping to do. And
Is there a leader?
it is currently, there's a board that includes Andrew from Kids Corner, Lauren Winter from Connect and Commit, a gentleman, the child pastor, I'm not sure what is, from the big stone church at the big intersection by Town Hall. What is
First
that?
Baptist?
The Baptist.
The First
Church?
Baptist Church?
First Baptist
Oh,
Church.
okay.
And then a couple other people who I can't remember off the top of my head.
Is that
'cause
the one
it's
that
late.
somebody from, that Abba's on too? Is Abba on that one?
Someone from Multicultural Network.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all the different nonprofits.
Except the school.
Except for the schools. Yeah, their school doesn't have anyone on there. So think of it as a chamber of commerce for youth.
Cool.
So like the studio on the Commons and all that. But
Is there one person who's the director?
there is no director, no.
It's
The rec department's involved.
getting it,
It's
getting
off the ground.
organized, yeah.
They're organizing themselves. I just happened to go to the meeting because they wanted to know about the strategic visioning and
Good.
where we were going.
Okay.
So,
Thank you. Thanks for letting us know.
January 22nd, 6:30 at the library. It's not really for adults to go to.
that's
Just
fine.
so you know.
Just so we know it exists, that's good.
So I have
Because Dot Butler was telling me about this last night, and it was this shadowy, I
Yeah,
couldn't
she was there.
understand. Yeah,
She was
okay.
part of it, yeah.
I have a request regarding those future meetings around FY19 budget. Given
Yes.
that we are having our budget conversation considerably later than we have in the past, it would be most helpful if, Judy, if there are sort of packets of information as they come together, if you could get them to the committee, well enough in advance of the meetings as
For the
opposed to.
23rd.
Yeah, I'm just saying, so rather than get like a manila packet that's 2 inches thick and
On
get it
Friday.
on a Friday evening, and then it's, that'll be a lot to process. So if whether there's a middle school chunk or a high school chunk or a elementary chunk that we could sort of
Specialized.
digest would be helpful.
Okay.
Okay. Superintendent report.
Very quickly, there's an organization in town called the Winchester Scholarship Foundation, which is very behind the scenes, but incredibly generous. And I've received their annual report. And for the last year, they awarded 130 Winchester High School graduates a total of $426,949 in scholarship funding, which is really quite amazing and incredibly generous. And it is well managed by Ted Lampson. He gives me a detailed report. They do such good work, so quietly, so respectfully, and we are eternally grateful. And our students are incredibly lucky to have such a generous community. And so I just wanted to make sure I said that publicly.
I believe Tom Halley's the chair of their board, of their grant-making.
Ted Lampson's a treasurer, so yes. And sorry, can you say that, Tom?
Tom Halley
Tom
is
Halley.
the chair of the scholarship awarding. Might be interesting to have them come in at some point and just.
So I've met with them once or twice. They, the one thing that I think could benefit them is they have a lot of endowments from people leaving. So most of their money is from trusts, and so they get. This is not sort of raise it this year and give it out. They spend the income from the trusts, and so it requires a lot of work to keep their portfolio.
Somebody's managing
Diverse, and they're managing their investments very well, and this is not a really public sort of. They don't want a lot of fanfare. They don't want to, but they do. But I think it would be helpful because then people would know this is a place where the custodians are very careful with the money, and if you're going to leave money, it's going to go directly to students and not to anything else. So yeah, I mean, I can make that offer and see if he or someone else from the organization wants to come. So the other thing I want to make sure that people here who are all watching at home with very interested at 10:30 at night, Cindy Boney has done an incredible job with our strategic visioning effort, which is something that is so hard to wrap your arms around. And we are at a very good place where we've identified 3 sort of beacons, but we need sort of a final session with public input. And I know that January is a hard time and everybody's really tired and busy, but on the 11th, this Thursday night at 7 p.m., we have a really good interactive program planned with our last meeting with our outside facilitator to get final feedback and sort of check the draft that you've seen most recently here at school committee. So I would encourage, all are welcome, community members, parents, students, teachers, administrators to participate in this last session so that we can come up with our kind of living draft of what the vision is for the district and check our many important decisions that are coming up against it. And that's all I have.
So our next.
Remind people where that meeting is?
The meeting is, I'm sorry, the meeting is, yep, you can guess. The meeting is at Winchester High School in the auditorium at 7 o'clock on January 11th, Thursday.
So maybe with the great thaw, people will come out and
I hope would be good.
Okay, so our next meeting is
The 23rd.
Our next regular meeting is the 23rd. We will hear the proposed budget presentation, and it will also be our public hearing. And we're not going to vote on it that night. We'll come back on the 30th and hear the report on the school start time study committee. And then have it just move into a discussion and vote on the fiscal year 19 budget on the 30th. That's the plan.
We're considering moving the meeting on the 30th to the high school auditorium so that we can be sure that anyone who wants to come and hear the school start time report can be in attendance and listen to it. And I don't know how people feel, whether people feel that's a good idea.
And then we would vote, on the start time decision on February 6th.
Okay.
So the final vote on the budget will be when?
So the final vote for the budget is right before town meeting.
Okay.
But the preliminary vote on the budget to send the numbers to the town manager is the 30th. Because he's just
asking in terms of, do we want to vote our priorities for the next 5 years before we vote our budget?
What do you mean the priorities for the next 5 years?
Our beacons. We want to vote our strategic vision before we vote the budget that's supposed to be following our vision.
So my
mean,
assumption,
call me
I think it's a
crazy.
good question. My assumption is that, given the available resources and the dramatic increase in some fixed costs, including health insurance, that we're gonna have to make some hard choices, and that our preliminary budget will be a budget that is richer than the town can afford without dipping deeply into reserves. So what I would say is if we have our beacons set, that can guide us as we decide what we're going to keep or what we're going to cut from the first proposal, which could be richer than what we actually end up with. Unless, by some miracle, our Chapter 70 is $1 million more than we expect, we'll be in good shape.
Yeah, as unwelcome as this suggestion might be, I must say, because I do feel like we're a little sort of late in talking about the budget compared to past cycles, and I don't have our budget development calendar in front of me. It feels like I know it feels later, but knowing that you've got the school start time discussion, and that will be a very big deal, I worry that these are two important things, and one may suck the oxygen from the other. We do have the meeting scheduled on the following week, which is Tuesday the 6th. I don't know that there's any charter that requires us to vote by the end of January, though we always have. But I believe the requirement is for the town manager to have his budget out by February 15th or near there. Is it worth considering, Judy and Susan, if we're talking about the budget, I'm not saying we don't talk about it on the 30th, but if we're talking about it on the 23rd, talking about it on the 30th, depending upon how school start time goes, what questions the committee has, the town manager certainly would be informed about sort of where we're headed. Is it possible we may want to consider a vote on February 6th? And does that still give Richard, might that give us the time we need to do our job and still give Richard the time he needs to prepare his budget? It's just a question.
So, and Susan can speak to this, my perspective is that whatever budget you vote for your first cut budget is you're approving what I have suggested, or you're adding to what I've suggested, and it's not the cut budget. We still have to make decisions around things like fees. We still have unknowns about the governor's budget. So you're right, the timing is kind of rotten because we don't even know what our revenue is for sure at the time that Richard has to, by charter, put his budget together. Right. So, but I always see that first budget as a flexible budget, and we have multiple discussions as things become clearer about enrollment, about revenue, about available resources on the town side, and so it's really you're voting to authorize me to submit that to him so he can start putting his full packet together and see how big that pie is of requests. So whether you vote on the 30th, he's going to need some numbers to plug in just to see on his side, because then he needs to start meeting with each department and whittling down based on available resources. So in terms of, we're exactly where we were last year around the initial presentation of the budget. Might be 1 week later, maybe, in terms of, we always present in January. And it may not feel like we've been doing a lot about budget, but I think we had a discussion, one meeting about enrollment and driving sort of class sections, and we had another meeting where we talked about special education, right. And then this meeting we're talking about courses and those sorts of initiative drivers. And so I feel as though we're always working on the budget. And the great unknown for us always is